dealing with the other's future. Genre: crime, thriller, adventure. Publication year: 2012. Author: JGM. Chapter 1: Speedy. Jonas was sitting now for quite some time in the pub waiting for Speedy. He had made Speedy's acquaintance on one of the legendary cubic techno parties in Rogwell in the year 1994. Back then, Jonas had approached Speedy hoping to find some drugs for him and his friends to take off. Speedy had answered him with an unmistakable accent. "Sure, man. If you need some pills, then you were right with me. Here I have a couple of dolphins. Brand new and mega strong. This I guarantee you. How many of them do you need?" Jonas bought 3 of them, and for each he paid 50 Swiss francs. This was a fair price then. It had happened before to him that he had to pay 60 Swiss francs for one pill. Therefore, he had the feeling that Speedy could be of benefit to him in the future and asked him for his telephone number. Speedy gave him his pager number with the advice, "If you need anything, you can contact me. I will call you back." For his buddies that evening, Jonas was their hero because the ecstasy pills really were as good as Speedy had promised. We are in Switzerland and right the year 1995, when Jonas, 19 years old, completes his baccalaureate Type D Modern Languages, where he learned English, French, Spanish, and Italian. Then he completes the mandatory military recruit school, which lasts 17 weeks. Afterwards, he signs on at the employment agency and is unemployed for 3 months until he finally gets procured from the agency a temporary employment at an insurance company for 12 months. He works there rather reluctantly as an assistant in the Department of Life Insurance. During this time, he manages to save almost his complete monthly salary of 4,100 Swiss francs because he still lives with his parents, so that after the 12 months he has managed to save approximately 40,000 Swiss francs. For the time after the employment, he plans a multi-month trip through South America to strengthen his Spanish skills and to see something of the world. One evening, he sees a TV documentary entitled Snow from the Andes. Based on this documentary, he has a crucial idea, which results in the following occurrences. Speedy finally entered the pub. Jonas saw him right away. Speedy instead did not seem to see him and searched with a stern look across the pub. Jonas let him search. He deliberately gave him no sign. With his unusual horn-rimmed specs, the tall mulatto reminded him inevitably at Wolfgang Borchert's lead character in the novel, Outside the Door. As Speedy finally located him, he went straight to the bar, ordered a Guinness beer, and then came over to Jonas's table. "Salady, my friend," said Speedy, talking large. He probably had seen too often Victor's late-night TV show. What he apparently didn't understand was the fact that most of the people didn't like his style of welcoming. "Everything okay? I can't complain." "Then let me hear. What do you need?" "With what can I serve you?" did he say with a waggish smile. "Well, this time the situation is somehow different." A moment of silence emerged. Speedy listened attentively. He always was looking for a good deal, always looking for the fast money. People of his kind are on a constant tension. As soon as they scent a good deal, they feel a comforting frisson and a shot of adrenaline flashes trough their body. "This time I want to sell something to you, or better said, I want you to sell something for me. Of course you will get your share of the gain." Speedy was clearly surprised and reacted accordingly. "Oi, oi, oi. Look, look. The mister is getting the taste for fast money. Look at him. What do you have in mind?" asked he with an unmistakable doubt in his voice. Jonas had to control his temper in order to not get angry at Speedy. With his stupid answer, he had already bugged him. Then he answered contained and directly, "Well, can you or can you not sell 3 kilograms of cocaine for me? Or do you know someone who would buy this amount from me, and for which price?" For Jonas, it was clear that the value of such an amount was about 300,000 Swiss francs when selling it on the street or more. Even if he never had consumed cocaine himself, he knew well the price for it. He had enough friends, which had already consumed it. Mostly friends from the house music scene. And it seemed to him that every scene had its drugs. The hip-hopers had hashish. The house scene had cocaine. The hippies had LSD. The rock scene had heroin, and the techno scene had amphetamine. And the normal citizen next door and his wife? They had alcohol and the psychotherapeutic drugs and the sleeping pills, which their physicians had prescribed them. "Let me think," answered Speedy, hesitant. It was obvious that he was now very careful with the choice of his words. Apparently, he was thinking how to get the maximum profit for himself. "Yes, there is someone whom I could ask, but with such a large amount at once it will get difficult to find a single buyer." "Tell me just the price I would get for 3 kilograms, said Jonas impatiently. Easy, easy, my friend. Do not rush. As I told you, it is difficult to sell such an amount fast and at once. And I suppose that you want to get rid of it quick, don't you? Then you will have to offer to the buyer a good price, especially if he should buy it at once. Well, I would say that you could sell it for 50 Swiss francs per gram. What? Do you want to mess around with me? This is 50% below the street market value. I bear the whole risk to get the stuff into the country. Well, leave it or take it, said Speedy and made an ugly grimace. Tell me when you find a buyer. In 3 months I would be ready to deliver, answered Jonas briefly, and after this conversation each of them went his way. It was pretty less what Jonas knew about Speedy, which was not unusual with this kind of acquaintances. Therefore he didn't know that Speedy's real name was Uwe Opman, and that his father died in a car accident when he was a boy, and that his mother became manic-depressive because of this incident. Then his mother went to the psychiatrist, which gave her an improper formulated attestation regarding the concerned time period of a 50% inability for work. She used the occasion and went to court, where she litigated so long until she got attributed a permanent 50% disability pension. Together with the widow's pension, she managed badly to hold herself and her son over water. Because of all this difficulty, she got more and more addicted to psychotherapeutic drugs. Her son instead got, because of all the inconveniences, at an early stage off the rails. He discontinued his apprenticeship as carpenter, preoccupied himself instead with esotericism and occultism, and denied categorically to pursue the path of an regular professional career. A shrink finally diagnosed schizophrenia on him, which caused him the internalization into a clinic. The psychiatrists assumed that he had a natural tendency to schizophrenia, which had been triggered by his excessive abuse of cannabis. After 2 years of suffering, he got adjudicated a 100% disability pension. So it happened that with only 20 years he was already a social outsider. He gradually recovered from his esotericism and occultism mania and started instead with gambling and finally with dealing to finance his gambling addiction. And so Speedy contacted the same day as so-called Mike. Also, this guy was with 25 years already a tragic figure of life. He had arrived in Switzerland as an adopted child with 5 years from Africa, but he did not manage in all the following years to grow fond of his new homeland. Who wonders, considering that he had to bear during 20 years a lot of pleasantry, marginalization, and discrimination, which mostly was expressed subtle and sometimes openly against him. He never had absolved a professional apprenticeship because he did not find any employer who offered him a place to do so, and so it came that he was expulsed from home when he turned 18 by his adoptive parents, who were very disappointed of him after he had committed several petty crimes. Mike's adoptive mother sometimes felt ashamed because she never had given Mike the love he would have deserved. Then she lied in her bed and tears rolled down her cheeks. Mike on his part likewise laid several nights awake in his bed and tears of anguish and anger rolled down his cheeks. One day he decided to fulfill the negative expectations that waited on a lot of men from his home country. He decided to become a drug dealer. At the beginning he worked during the day as temporary help in a restaurant and only sold drugs in his spare time. After a while, he dedicated himself completely to drug dealing. And so it came, as told, that Speedy contacted Mike, and then after 7 days he called Jonas to tell him that he had found a buyer. Speedy had waited deliberately so long to raise the impression in Jonas that he had had a lot of effort in finding an appropriate buyer. Chapter 2, Libertad y Orden. It sounds like cynicism if you consider that in a country like Colombia, in which about 50% of the population live in poverty and several people saw themselves forced to flee into the cities because of the ongoing conflicts in the outside provinces and the therewith correlated human rights violations. The national motto is Libertad y Orden, which means liberty and order. When Jonas went off the plane, the sun was shining bright on the El Dorado airport. He took a deep breath and simply felt well. He had reached the first stage of his trip, Bogota. He took a room in the Hotel Morrison for $82 the night. Nearby the hotel, there were a lot of parks like the Jardín Botánico, the Parque Simón Bolívar, and the Parque El Lago. A little more far away, also the university campus could be found. He felt well in this kind of surrounding. The city itself was constructed very symmetrical, like a typical American town. There were almost no curved and wound lanes as they could be found in European old towns, which he found a little bit of a pity. In the middle of the Park Simón Bolívar there was even a golf course. He had booked the hotel already in Zurich before his departure. If Jonas had been able at this moment to interpret the signs of fate correctly, he he would have taken a turn. As this was not the case, he continued executing his plan, and his further acts became the beginning of an eventful odyssey. Can you picture what will be? So limitless and free, desperately in need of some stranger's hand, in a desperate land. Jim Morrison. The dawn started to lie down over the city when Jonas stepped out on the street. He had pulled over a light jogging jacket, and in his right pocket he carried his Iowa Walkman. He loved his Iowa Walkman. If we consider how the irony of the faith led many years later to the circumstance that at the time in the market-leading company like Iowa, which was founded in 1951 and produced Japan's first cassette recorder, years later did not manage to cope with the digital age, but instead felt aside with its analog products and was bought in 2002 by Sony. It is likely to fall in a mood of slight compassion if you are a true fan of music cassettes. Jonas was listening to a new track named The Search by the Trendsetters, which at the time was quite in. The mentioned electro tune was brand new and fitted somehow thematically to Jonas's planned activity tonight. He got a kind of prickling, as also he was on the search. It was a dangerous adventure in which Jonas had engaged, and he was conscious about that. If we consider that at the beginning of the 90s, Bogotá had one of the highest homicide rates of Latin American cities. Only with the anti-crime campaign, which started in 1995, it was possible to lower the homicide rate until 2006 by 71%, so that today the homicide rate is lying under the rates of comparable cities like Caracas, Washington, Rio de Janeiro, or Mexico City. Where should he begin to search? Where do I find such an amount of cocaine? Asked he himself. He decided to take a taxi, therefore he asked the next pedestrian where he could find the next taxi station. The man pointed him in the right direction and told him that he would need about 15 minutes by feet. On his way there he noticed that most of the streets only had numbers but no names, what he rather found strange as European. He was glad when he finally reached the taxi station. Jonas went to the first taxi in the queue and asked him in Spanish, "Hello, I am staying a few days as tourist in the city. Where can I have some fun here? Do you know some good techno clubs and could you drive me there?" The taxi driver smiled at him and answered politely, "You speak well Spanish, boy. Get in, I drive you wherever you want to go." Jonas got into the car at the front next to the driver. The driver looked at him surprised but smiled then towards him and said, "Okay, I am fine with it. Normally my guests sit on the back seat." "Where are you from?" asked the taxi driver shortly after they drove off. Jonas decided to answer in a diplomatic form to his question, as he often had heard that the people outside Switzerland often had the impression that the people of Switzerland were all swimming in money. Once he even had heard from an immigrant in Switzerland that in his country the rumor was going around that in Switzerland everybody received a kind of basic income independently if you work or not. He probably meant that a lot of immigrants in Switzerland managed to obtain some kind of financial aid from the government by cheating. As Jonas did not want to be duped with the fare, he decided to answer his question with, "I am from France." "Ah, from France. Paris, the city of love," said the taxi driver exalted. "Oh no, I am from Mulhouse," tried Jonas to calm down his enthusiasm rapidly. Showing emotions wasn't Jonas' thing. It did fit to him, neither with his character, nor with his roots and his culture. He simply could not understand how the people of Bogotá could feel happiness in such a desolate economic situation. On the one side, he admired their easiness of being. On the other side, he found them creepy just because of their careless attitude. He found them to be the kind of people which simply wasn't able to see also the serious part of life. Maybe this was exactly the reason why they were in this miserable position. Maybe seriousness, sense of duty, and correctness did not have the same high rating in this society like they did in the Swiss society. Everything was so perfect there. His heart filled with pride by the thought of his home country. He quickly suppressed the doubts that came up when he thought about the high expectations towards him, with which he saw himself confronted constantly. His parents, the school, the employer, and the society. All they wanted or expected something from him. He often found their high expectations as overbearingly. They did not leave him place for his own path and decisions. Zero tolerance. Sometimes he also realized the disadvantages of his home country culture, the constant race with the time. Mainly plenty of people had always an appointment to attend, also in their private life. When he asked someone how he was doing, he often heard the answer, "I am under stress." A joint helped him often to forget about the hectic rush. Generally, the drugs helped him with this subject. When he took an ecstasy pill and danced on the floor to the rhythm of the bass line, then he felt free, then he could finally forget the stress, or better said, he was able to overlay it with something else. Jonas simply wasn't a great fan of effort and competition, especially not from effort that had to be generated in a group. Therefore, he never had liked the common school sport, especially not football. He disliked that he had so less direct ball contact during a game. What he even disliked more was his feeling that group sports did not give enough merit to the effort of the individual within the group. His point of view regarding group sports was the following: a lot of people generate the performance, but only a few, the braggers, get the appraisal. That disturbed his sense of justice considerably. Mulius, repeated the taxi driver with a long U and added then, I don't know this city. It was obvious for Jonas that the guy only spoke Spanish. It was strange for him to remark that he was able to speak 5 languages beside his mother tongue Swiss German, while the rest of the world seemed to manage life with fewer languages. But in Switzerland things were different. This circumstance had historical reasons. And his heart filled itself again with pride when he thought about the fact that in Switzerland most of the people were able to speak 2 or even 3 languages. What Jonas ignored is the fact that in Europe there is another country which uses several languages parallel, namely Spain. They use mainly 4 languages beside the worldwide known Spanish. The languages are Gallego in the region of Galicia, Orense, Catalan in the region of Catalunya, Barcelona, Vascons in the Basque region, Bilbao, Valenciano in the region of Valencia, and Castellano in the region of Madrid and Castilla y León, which is better known as Spanish, where Spanish is recognized in the whole country as main official language, whereas the other languages are only recognized in the respective regions. Well, a lot of people may be surprised by these facts, but the Babylonian mixture of languages is rather an economic disadvantage for the country, contrary to the situation in Switzerland. All these languages are also the source of many internal animosities. It happened more than to one employee of an international active company that he requested his displacement from Switzerland to Barcelona to detect that they do not only speak Spanish there but also Catalan, which is quite different. In fact, all these mentioned languages show a remarkable difference between each other. Gallego has similarities to Portuguese, Catalan to French, and Vasquence to no other language in this world. This language is, upon the common opinion of the scientists, not familiar with any other language in this world. So it does not belong to one of the traditional language families and therefore a so-called isolated singular language. Who wonders with all this uniqueness that the Basques already founded in 1895 the Nationalistic Basque Party, and based on that party 1959 the ETA was founded, which is trying since 1960 to separate the Basque region from the rest of Spain by using massive acts of terror. The goal is that the Basque region becomes an economic and political autonomy in the Spanish territory. They are trying to obtain the status of an independent government. There is also to be aid that there only exist 4 further such isolated languages worldwide, and that even native Spanish have big difficulties to understand all these languages. Mostly a common Spanish speaks Spanish in the second official language of its region. When it comes to the second official languages of the other regions, most Spanish have to surrender, as the particular languages are too different from each other. The younger generation mostly also speaks English as foreign language, whereas the dominating of the language often is not taken so seriously like in Switzerland, which finally also adds up as disadvantage in the international economic competition. Where are you heading? Do you want to have fun tonight? Exactly. Do you know a good techno club? Techno? What is that? What, you do not know what techno is? It is a music style. It is the most known music today, answered Jonas, slightly offended by his ignorance. How does this music sound like? Can you dance it together? Ah, stammered Jonas. He had gotten into need of an explanation. How could techno music be explained? Well, it sounds like that. Then he decided to make some typical techno noises and felt absolutely ridiculous. Ah, you mean this bum drug music, interrupted him the taxi driver. Oh boy, this is not music, this is noise. With that music you do not get to know any beautiful girls. Jonas didn't answer to his statement. He felt offended and turned his head away from him. You know, my boy, at my time these things were a lot better. The young people used to dance together, and that was the real thing. That is how you can get to know gorgeous girls. But nowadays this tradition is disappearing slowly. Nevertheless, you are a lucky boy, because here you are in South America. Here we know best how to dance together to good music. Forget about this techno. That is crap. I show you a fine salsa club. Suddenly, the taxi driver stopped talking. He had noticed that he had gone too far with his expression of opinion. These tourists, he thought, they are so difficult. Always easily offended if I do not flatter them. In fact, he disliked the tourists, but he once again got aware of his dependency from their money, and so he started to appease Jonas with the words, "Is everything okay? Surely I know such discos. I will bring you there. That's no problem." The rest of the ride, they didn't speak a word. After 20 minutes, the ride ended. The taxi driver stopped the car and said to Jonas, "Here we are. Over there is the club, El Pachango. The ride costs you $2.50. Jonas gave him, without saying a word, a $5 bill and kept his hand open. The taxi driver understood his gesture and returned him the change. "Have fun," he said to him when Jonas went off the car without saying a word and thought to himself, "Go to hell, you prick." While Jonas thought to himself, "Go to hell, you damned ignorant." Therewith the negative karma was equalized mutually. Chapter 3, El Pachango. Jonas went over to the club, El Pachango, and stood into the waiting queue. He started to feel a little uncomfortable. Here he wanted to start his first attempt to get the 3 kilograms cocaine. From the inside of the club, a rhythmic Latin house music came through. This made him feel better. After 30 minutes of sheer endless waiting, he finally got into the disco. It was nothing special. Simply a big room. In the middle, a dance floor. At each corner hung a speaker, which was fixed on the ceiling. There was a big bar and around it various possibilities to sit down. Jonas took a look at the rest of the place. According to Jonas, drug dealers had a common denominator in their exterior appearance. Looking after the typical dealer, Jonas scanned the place with his eyes over and over. After 2 hours of intensive watching and walking around, he had found the right one. He had long, messily hair and a T-shirt with the inscription, Iron Maiden, which absolutely didn't fit into this place. During the last hour, again and again, he was approached by other men or couples. They only stayed a short time with him and left then quickly. This is the right one, thought Jonas, and approached him determined. The Iron Maiden guy was staring at the floor, but suddenly raised his view without raising his head, which gave him a more dangerous aspect, and looked Jonas straight into the eyes. Jonas stopped quickly and approached him then slower. As he had reached him, he murmured a barely hearable hello. The Iron Maiden guy answered him reserved. "What's up? Do you have some? Maybe even eat little more?" hurried Jonas to ask him. The Iron Maiden guy looked him in the eyes. He waited with his answer, then he said, "Wait here a moment. I have what you need," and went away. Jonas was relieved. It was that simple. Now he only had to ask him if he could provide him a bigger amount. He knew it. Here was the paradise of coke. People here were desperately waiting for selling it. He had lost sight of the guy, but he did not have to wait long. After 2 minutes, he returned together with another guy, which also was wearing an Iron Maiden t-shirt. It seemed to be normal at this place, or it was the distinctive mark of this gang of dealers. Now I have to be extra carefully not to make any mistake, thought Jonas. "This is the guy," said the Iron Maiden guy. "Well then, let's do it," said another, and together they took him by his arms. Their grip was strong and Jonas was like paralyzed for the first moment. "Hey, what's going on here?" did he stammer, but they simply overheard him and pulled him forward. "Where do you bring me?" asked Jonas, full of panic. Then he noticed that they went in the direction of the exit. As they arrived outdoors, they pushed him to the ground. Jonas felt, rolled over to the side, and quickly stood up again. "Bugger off. We don't want such dudes like you here. You prick," added the other one, and tried to give him a kick. Jonas was barely able to evade his foot by jumping to the side. "Bugger off now," said the guy, and while saying it, he made a step forward to Jonas and threatened him with his fist. It was not necessary to ask Jonas twice to do so. He began to run like crazy. He ran to the next corner and turned abruptly to the right. Phew, what a stress. Jonas felt pitiful. These guys weren't drug dealers, but a mix between warden and bouncer. My God, what a stupid mistake had occurred to him. He went down the street, and the only thing he wanted to get fast back to the hotel. Suddenly he heard behind him a voice, which called, "Hey man." Jonas turned around like lightning and saw about 15 meters behind him a guy. He could not recognize if the guy was wearing also an Iron Maiden t-shirt, but he didn't care about it, as he started to run like obsessed by the devil. He ran and ran as fast as he could. The guy close behind him. He seemed to catch him up. My good, aren't they still not satisfied? He had enough. He had been humiliated and had learned his lesson. Now he only wanted to have his peace. The guy came closer to him. Now he was only a few steps behind him. In a few seconds, he would be able to grab him. Oh God, oh God. The guy pushed him on the left shoulder. Jonas stumbled, started to flounder, and collided with the wall on his right side. Then his pursuer grabbed harshly his jacket and pulled him up. "What's the matter with you, you idiot?" roared he at him. "I can get you what you are looking for. This is all I wanted to tell you." Jonas was stunned. Chapter 4, Pablo and El General. "Now calm down, man. My name is Pablo. Are you all right?" Jonas answered him. "Yes, I am okay." "What do you mean with that? That you have what I am looking for?" "No, don't play stupid." "Cocaine? Of course. What else? Isn't that what you are looking for, or not?" "Well, yes, but It's okay, amigo. You picked out the wrong guy, but now you are at the right address. Come on, tell me how much you need of it." Jonas hesitated but answered then. 3 kilograms. Pablo opened his eyes wide, followed by a widespread grin. Then he said, "You are kidding me, aren't you? Do you even have so much money with you?" His last sentence sounded threatening to Jonas. "No, of course not." "Sure, of course not. Well, amigo, are you serious with that?" Jonas nodded. "Well, let's meet in 2 days here at the same place at 10 p.m. You bring the money and I will present you, El General." "He is your man," said he pretentious. "No, who will guarantee me that you are not going to knock me off?" "We will meet at 9 p.m. at the airport in front of the main entry. There you handle me the cocaine and I give you the money. And by the way, how much are you going to charge for it?" Pablo hesitated a while, then he said, "You are a foxy guy. Well, I will see what I can do." He took his handy, went some steps away from him, and made a phone call. Jonas wasn't able to hear what he was talking about. After 3 minutes, he came back to him. Pablo said, Okay. You win. We do it your way. You can come in 2 days to the airport and bring $20,000 with you. Then you get the stuff, okay? Let's shake hands," said he and reached him his hand. Jonas hesitated shortly. Thereupon Pablo said, "Come on, let's shake on it." Jonas shook his hand. Pablo smiled and then ambled away. "Wait a moment," shouted Jonas after him. "How do I get home now? I need a taxi." "Sure, amigo, I call you one." He grabbed again his mobile and a minute later he said to Jonas, "In a few minutes a cab will arrive. Shall I wait with you here so that nothing happens to you?" Jonas didn't overhear the sarcastic tone and answered him, "No thanks, it's not necessary." Pablo nodded and grinned, and then he left without losing another word. Chapter 5, El Dorado. Jonas was happy that he had arrived safe to the hotel. During the ride he said to the taxi driver that he should not drive on a direct way to the hotel and that he should drop him 2 streets from the hotel away. The driver was surprised by his demand, but he didn't ask any questions and Jonas did not signalize any readiness to answer them. Jonas did that as a precaution just in case Pablo tried to follow him. He wanted to distract him. The next morning he went to the subsidiary of a Swiss bank, which was located in the Edificio Teleport nearby the university, to get $22,000 from his account. Until now, his Visa card had been sufficient to get money on an automated teller machine. The bank clerk was very surprised and warned Jonas explicitly. He gave him the tip to transfer the money from his account to a Western Union subsidiary at the El Dorado airport, where he could then withdraw it without risks, which he finally did. It was 8:50 p.m. when Jonas found himself in front of the main entry to the El Dorado airport. Shortly after, a car with toned glasses drove up. The door opened from the other side and Pablo got off the car. He walked around the car. Jonas wanted to shake hands with him, but Pablo quickly raised his hand and laid his forefinger on his lips, signalizing him to shut up. He walked close by Jonas's side and whispered to him, "Follow me." Jonas followed him. Pablo moved neatly between the passengers. While they walked through the halls of the airport, Pablo gave Jonas a sign with his hand to keep more distance to him. After 7 minutes of walking around, it seemed that Pablo had found what he was looking for. He headed to a restroom, which seemed less frequented, and walked into it. When Jonas went into the restroom, he wasn't able to see Pablo. Jonas had expected that Pablo tried to overcome him here. Therefore, he bent down immediately to see in which toilet Pablo was. He saw his shoe spikes, which headed to the wall, and his pant legs. He also could see that someone else was in a toilet. Then he stepped into the toilet that was left to Pablo's one. At first, nothing happened, but suddenly he noticed how Pablo's head stick out over the edge of the toilet sidewall. He gave him a sign to be quiet and pointed in the direction where the other man was sitting on the toilet. Then he submerged again his head. They waited about 5 minutes until the man had left the facilities. As soon as the door to the restroom was closed, Pablo removed one of the 5 packets, which he had fixated around his belly and back, and stretched his head again over the toilet sidewall. Whispering, he said, "Here is the stuff. Do you have the money?" and handed Jonas the packet. "Yes," said Jonas, lapidary. He took the packet and clamped it under his arm. Then he asked him, "Where is the rest of it?" "My God, are you a distrustful guy?" said Pablo, irritated, and raised his shirt to remove the rest of the packets from his body and reached them over to Jonas. "You don't have a chance to escape with it, boy. Outside, El General is waiting for us." When Jonas got all the packets, he deliberately chose one, took his Swiss Army knife, opened it, and poked it into it. He often had seen this in the movies and found it to be a cliché, but he never had thought about carrying out the act himself one day. "Come on," rushed him Pablo, but Jonas did not let him deviate him. He rubbed some of the powder that oozed out on his gum. This caused him a dazing feeling on his gum and a bitter taste in his mouth. Exactly the reaction he had expected. He was satisfied about it. Jonas had only taken twice cocaine until now, whereas he never had dared to sniff it, but instead took it the oral way, like an ecstasy pill. His friends had laughed at him and said, "Don't you have the guts to sniff it? This is a pure waste taking it that way," but this did not bother him nor hinder him in taking it like an ecstasy pill. Whereas he was putting the packages in his backpack, he said to Pablo, "The money is in a locker here at the airport." "What? You don't have it with you?" countered Pablo, agitated. "You ass. Come on, guide me to the locker." Jonas left the toilet and Pablo followed him. As he stood in front of the restroom, he saw indeed a second guy, which resembled Pablo a lot, and which was waiting nearby. The guy started to follow them, and Jonas led both of them during a 6 minutes walk to the place where the lockers were situated. Both of them followed him like the chicks do with the mother hen. As they arrived there, he stuck the key into the locker, opened it, and pulled out a bag. He opened the bag in front of them so that they could see the money bundles and then handed the bag over to them. Pablo took the bag with a wide smile on his face. He putted his hand into the bag and roughly began to estimate the amount of bundles. There were about 20 bundles, each containing 10 $100 banknotes. Jonas used the occasion when both were deepened into the money counting and fled from the scene. Jonas was barely able to hear Pablo say, "Hey, where are you going?" But apparently they did not follow him, as it would have been hopeless to find him in the mass. They had the money and Jonas the cocaine. Everyone was happy like that. Chapter 6. The Trump in the Sleeve. Jonas spent the following days with walks in the nearby parks and in the nearby campus of the Ciudad Universitaria. He also went twice to the cinema, where he had detected that some U.S. movies were shown earlier in the Colombian cinemas than in Switzerland. He supposed that this had to do with the geographic proximity to the USA and eventually also with the presumably higher number of potential customers. In the hotel, they had an internet access which was accessible to the public. Every evening, he looked at some Swiss news sites or checked his emails and answered them to keep up the contact to his home country. Once he went to the Biblioteca Publica El Tinal, as he expected to be able to read some magazines for free there, like he did in Switzerland, and because he generally liked to spend his time in libraries. He got disappointed when he noticed that the libraries in Colombia did offer beside books also movies and CDs for lending, but no magazines. So he bought himself daily an issue of the El Tiempo newspaper, which he read between his walks sitting on a park bench. He did so until the 11th day of his stay in Colombia, when the receptionist at the hotel told him that a packet had arrived for him. He asked her to order an employee to bring the packet to his room. After the clerk had delivered the packet to his room, he closed the door behind him and a satisfied smile broadened his face. Now it was time for Jonas to play his trump, which he had hidden all the time over in his sleeve. Well, let's say he hadn't his trump in his sleeve, but he got it delivered by post inside the packet that was lying in front of him. Jonas had thought a lot about the transport of the cocaine from Bogota back to Switzerland, until he finally had decided himself for the best idea from his point of view, namely the transport of the cocaine in a bicycle frame. So, his trump was a folding bicycle. With a lot of effort, he had managed in Switzerland to find such a folding bicycle, which he had bought for 690.00 Swiss francs. As Jonas belonged to the type of person which liked to plan in advance and cede nothing to the hazard, Howe had sent the bicycle in a packet a few days before he had left Switzerland. He had chosen the sending form post-pack international priority so that he could count with receiving the packet in Bogotá in 5 till 10 working days. As recipient, he had put his name and the address of the hotel where he resided, actually, the hotel he had reserved in advance in Switzerland. The whole thing cost him only 249.00 Swiss francs, which was rather convenient compared to the price he would have paid if he had shipped the packet with an international parcel delivery company. He would easily have to pay over 2,000.00 Swiss francs. With joy, he started to unpack the bike. Now, only one thing still worried him. Would the whole cocaine fit into the bicycle frame or not? That was the key question. He had done a test in Switzerland using flour, but he was not sure if cocaine had the same density like flour or if it would require a larger volume in the frame. So he started to place the cocaine into the frame, as he anyway had to do it. In the parcel, he had everything he needed to do so. Jonas started to twist of the saddle and the handlebars from the bicycle. Then he took a thin plastic bag and shoved it into the frame by using a prolonged spanner. He did this from each side where he had an aperture, so that he shoved into each frame part 2 bags. Now came the veritably tricky part of the whole exercise. He carefully took the first cocaine packet and started with decanting the cocaine from the packet into the plastic bags in the bicycle frame. He continued doing so, and after an hour of strain and highest concentration, he had finished. Satisfied with his work, he gave himself a pat on the shoulder. At the end, he took a tube of superglue and trickled some drops on the saddle bar, which he then inserted into the frame. The same he did with the handlebars and also with the screw closure in the middle of the frame, which could be opened to fold and unfold the bike. This closing measure was necessary so that nobody could easily open the bike anymore. Back in Switzerland, it would be necessary to remove the glue with dissolver or to saw up the frame with a metal saw in order not to contaminate the cocaine with dissolver. But about these things he could rack his brain later. Jonas was full of pride, as the first part of his plan had succeeded. Well, this pride was from a moral point of view not appropriate, but this kind of thoughts he had left behind him already before he arrived here. He was convinced of the following. 1. Everyone who takes drugs has to blame himself for it. 2. Everyone can decide by himself to take drugs or not. 3. Cocaine is not such a bad drug and harmful like heroin. These were the usual stereotype cliché-like arguments, which are often used by consumers as well by dealers to justify their behavior. Let's take a closer look at these arguments and try to disprove them. The first 2 arguments are correlated with each other. What would someone like Jonas think about the following counter-arguments? Not every consumer has to blame himself for his drug addiction. Just the opposite is the case. Most of the consumers are introduced by someone close to them into the drug consumption. The fewest just decide out of the blue to start consuming drugs. Therefore, the instigator has to be blamed for the drug consumption of the person he misled into the drugs usage. Sometimes the instigation happens indirectly. For example, when the younger brother sees what the older one does and wants to do equally. Partially, the instigation happens directly. For example, when the circle of friends says, "Come on, don't be so timid, try it also once." All kind of variations of instigation to a first-time drug consumption are possible, and very rarely someone's curiousness is so strong that he starts autonomous a search for drugs on the streets. There is another counter-argument, which is rarely heard, namely, if there wouldn't be produced any illegal drugs, there would be no consumption possible. The efforts of the government point exactly in that direction. Production and selling of narcotic drugs are prohibited. But most of the proponents of narcotic drugs say that there have always been narcotic drugs and that people would start to produce narcotic drugs by themselves or try to obtain replacements for them. Here we can counter that the production of narcotic drugs is most probably not an option for most of the consumers, as they lack of knowledge and means. That people always like to consume different narcotics is proven cultural, historical, and unfortunately a lot of people did not become aware that the damage caused by the consumption of the most popular of all cultural historical drugs, namely alcohol, is enormous. Alcohol has killed more people than all reprehensible dictators like Hitler, Stalin, Mao, and Saddam together. Also does alcohol cause numerous family tragedies and is responsible for the pauperization of many individuals. But still it seems that alcohol cannot be banned from our culture. But it does not mean that if we have already such a devastating narcotic drug in our culture, where we apparently do not get along without it, that we have to admit more of those drugs or that we need more of those drugs in our culture. On the contrary. And this leads us to the third argument. The narcotics proponents often refer to the extreme emotional, physical, and social pauperization of heroin addicts. They simply orient themselves on the worst case and compare everything with that. They think that by that comparison, the consumption of other narcotics is automatically free of any doubts. It is clear that this isn't the case. Santa Marta. When Jonas landed on the airport of Simón Bolívar in Santa Marta, Colombia, it was 1:15 p.m. He had flown with a national airline departing from Bogotá. Santa Marta obtained its income mainly from tourism, trading, and commercial fishing. At the beginning of 1900 until 1930, the United Fruit Company had been very active in the cultivation and trading with bananas in this region. The company did not have the best reputation because regarding its business conduct, and it also introduced the nowadays as depreciatory used term Banana Republic. Jonas had chosen this location because of a specific reason. It was time to enter the second phase of his mission, Snow from the Andes, the return to Switzerland. Also for that he had something special in mind. From the beginning on, it was clear to him that he could impossibly transport by plane the drugs back to Switzerland undiscovered. Therefore, the hideaway in the bicycle frame was to unsecure and could have been discovered easily with an X-ray machine. No, he had chosen a way back where he rated the risk of customs controls much lower. The way by boat. And therefore Santa Marta was very appropriate as port of departure. He didn't even bother searching for a hotel. Instead, he told the taxi driver to bring him directly to the port. He was able to store the bicycle without problems in the trunk of the taxi. Nevertheless, it was an unusual impression he made with his bicycle as tourist. After he arrived at the port, he ate a typical Colombian menu consisting of a fish soup as starter and a point steak together with beans, rice, and steamed tomatoes and onions, and a fried egg as main dish. Then he started his search for a skipper who would bring him to Spain. The first man he asked told him that there was a big commercial provider for transatlantic cruises named El Transatlantico, and that there were also 2 private skippers, which offered such charter cruises. One of them was just right now on a cruise, but the other one was apparently free. He should ask Juanito and its son. Jonas preferred the second option with the private skipper, as he assumed that then the customs controls would even be less. He surely then also could convince the skipper to land later on a quiet bay in Spain. Jonas walked along the boat lines until he finally arrived at the end of a line at a small boat with the inscription El Juanito. That was it. His first impression wasn't exactly the best. The color peeled off the walls of the boat. As the captain appeared on the railing, his impression of grubby was complete. Jonas had the impression that the name Juanito, which was the belittled version of Juan, did not at all want to fit to the sight that was offered to him. When he saw this man, Juanito was unshaved. He kept his gray, unkempt hair hidden under a beret. His face was rutted by lines, and the gray eyes looked cold and hostile. "What are you looking for?" asked him Juanito with distrust. Jonas did not have another alternative than react with a friendly smile. "Well, I am traveling as tourist and looking for a possibility to travel by boat to Spain." Juanito's face expression changed immediately. His eyes flashed, like those of a predator, which has scented a prey, and he putted on an artificial smile, which showed a line of badly groomed yellowish teeth. "Hallelujah! Heaven is sending us a nice tourist. Come, Pedrito, come. We have customer." Instantly, a youngster of 14 years appeared on the deck. He was wearing a dirty yellow t-shirt and gym trousers like Jonas had worn during physical education when he was a kid. He looked haggard and his face didn't make a happy expression. Most of the time, he looked down to the floor, and only for a fraction of a second he looked Jonas in the eyes. "Get on board, sir. My name is Juanito," said he politely to Jonas, while he bawled to the boy, "Pedrito, take this man's luggage." The way he changed his emotional expression in his voice from one moment to the other was frightening. The boy went intimidated to Jonas and took the bicycle. He also wanted to take his bag, but Jonas signaled him that he wanted to carry the bag himself. He had $900 inside it together with his passport and his camera. Until now, he had used it only in Bogotá to take a few photos of the parks and some snapshots of the city. Back at home, he wanted to explain to his family that he had taken so few photos because he was so impressed by the country and the hospitality of the people there that he didn't have the time to take a lot of photos. Or he simply would explain that the camera went broken during the trip and that he would keep his impressions forever in his mind. As he didn't want to get ripped off by Juanito, Jonas intentionally did not talk about the price for the cruise. What irritated him for the fraction of a second was the circumstance that Juanito as well did not talk about the price. Maybe he had judged him wrong at first sight? Maybe he was just an old man with its son, which had lost his wife and now tried to survive and therefore was thankful for each dollar he earned. Looking back, this was just one of those thoughts in life, which oneself only gets aware for a blink of an eye. One of these thoughts that remains volatile in the mind and submerges quickly, even if this kind of thoughts are decisive as they contain important signals and messages for the future course of a relation or an intention, if you know how to interpret the signs and messages. But the interpretation of these signals is not an exact science. It lies more on intuition, experience, and coincidence to make the right decisions, introduce the right actions, or speak the right words, and by doing so changing the fate into other paths. On the way to new borders. It did not take long until they were ready for departure. The three of them went in the afternoon to the nearby market to buy the provisions for the next 2 till 3 weeks that the cruise would last. Juanito asked Jonas friendly to assume the expenses for the provisions, which he did gladly. In the early evening they set sail. Jonas had accommodated himself in a small 2x2.50 m cabin. After they were 1 hour on sea, Juanito asked Pedrito to cook something for all of them. Jonas and Pedrito went together to the caboose, and while Jonas sat on the table, Pedrito flourished literally by cooking a menu for all. It seemed that he really enjoyed it. Jonas tried to involve him into a conversation, as he had been so silent until now. This seemed the right moment. How does it come that you can cook so well? My mother taught me so. She was an excellent cook. Oh well, did she work in a restaurant? Yes, she worked in the kitchen of a hotel and she was the best cook there. Maybe she wants to get independent one day and open a restaurant together with you? Regarding all the tourists in Santa Marta, this would surely be a good business. Surprisingly, Pedrito did not answer him. Jonas asked himself if he maybe had not understood him acoustically and posed his question again. Pedrito still didn't answer. Can't you hear me? Why don't you give me an answer? Suddenly, Pedrito turned around and yelled at him. No, she doesn't want to get independent. She is dead. And now leave me in peace. And with tears in his eyes, he left the caboose. Jonas remained back astonished. Then he went over to the cooking stove and took the 2 pots from the boiling plates so that the food would not get burnt. A short time afterwards, Juanito entered the caboose and said, "The poor boy, but you could not know about it. He lost his mother at the age of 10. Then he went to the cooking stove and put the pots again on the boiling plates. Jonas asked him, a little irritated, "And who is actually steering the boat?" "Oh, the boy is steering it. Each 5 hours we take turns in everything we do. That works pretty well. Do you have a lot of guests?" "It depends. Not so many. The people prefer the commercial providers of cruises. They offer more comfort. We work in an economic niche. Our customers are more likely divers, adventurers, and individual tourists like you, sir, that book us. Please call me Jonas." He disliked this constant "sir." "No problem, Jonas. An unusual name in this region. How do you write it?" Jonas spelled the name to him. Thereupon Juanito said, "You write it with a J? Would it then not be pronounced different?" And he said again Jonas, but he pronounced it in Spanish what in German sounds like Jonas. "Well, so different can languages be. In German you pronounce the J like in Spanish the LL. Whereas the letter combination CH sounds like the Spanish J," explained Jonas to him. It is weird. Languages are so different like the people who speak them," commented Juanito. "How does it come that your name is Juanito? I do not want to be impolite, but isn't this rather a name for a younger person?" asked Jonas diplomatically. Juanito did not take offense at what he said. Instead, he started to laugh loud. "Ha, ha, ha. Yes, you are right. Well, it is simply the combination of my name Juan and the one of my son Pedrito. You can also call my simply Juan, if you like. Most of the tourists prefer to call me Juanito." Then he grinned again. Well, things were sometimes so simple. One putted in front of him a dish with fish and beans on the table and sat beside him. They ate together, and then one asked Jonas to come with him on the bridge where they could continue to speak, while Pedrito could eat alone in the caboose. The steering cabin on the bridge was a small room. Jonas was not able to read any useful information out of the steering instruments. It had to be difficult to steer a boat over the wide Atlantic to the right destination, even if it was such a small one, thought Jonas. "Do you manage to live only from the income you generate with the tourists?" asked Jonas curiously. "No. And we even don't want to live only from the income generated by the tourists. You have been lucky. One day later, and we would have set sail, because mainly I trade with handcrafted souvenirs for the tourist shops in Spain and also leather and accessories, which are being finished in Spain. My cargo compartment is full of it. Well, okay. In return, we import sherry and other Spanish wines from the wine-growing areas around the region of Quito, which the tourists in Santa Marta like a lot and therefore the restaurant owners like to buy from us. For the rest of the evening, they did not talk a lot. Jonas went at midnight to his cabin after lying during hours recreating on the deck and watching the full moon. During the evening, one had told him some basic knowledge regarding navigation. Among other things, he had explained him how the polar star originally had been used to navigate, as it is visible during the whole year on the northern hemisphere and indicates very precisely the North Pole. Long drawn-out days. The days on sea were rather unspectacular. Jonas, which was used to live with a constant flow of stimuli and sensations, felt the days in the beginning as very long draw-out. He admired the other both, how they could simply be for hours without speaking a word. They didn't even have a TV, but only a world receiver radio, which seemed to constantly blare when turning it on. During that time, Jonas had the strangest ideas and posed himself the most unthinkable questions. He thought about things he never would have thought about if he hadn't been in this situation. For example, who financed such boring radio broadcasts? Who liked to listen to them? And so on. For the first time in his life, he had enough time. Time to reflect. For a modern human, it is not so easy to occupy his mind with nothing. Simply to be. Most of the people don't even have the idea to do so, or they simply find it unbearable or meaningless. The amount of occupations is nearly endless. Whether we go to work or on holidays, we do sports or wellness, go to the cinema or the theater, visit fitness or spare time courses, bring our sons to karate classes or our daughters to the ballet, watch TV or surf in through the internet, meet friends for dinner or go with them to the discotheque, do the household or the laundry, and so on and so forth. But rarely or even never we just sit down and start to reflect. Yes, simply experience contemplating and muse as a meaningful occupation. Try to tell someone from our society that yesterday afternoon you have sat down for 2 hours just contemplating. In the best case, people will laugh at you. This you are aware of. But why will they laugh at you? Probably because for most of the people, muse does not serve an obvious straight purpose. Labor you need to earn your living. Holidays and wellness to recover. The movies and the theater to entertain yourself or for deflection. The postgraduate professional education and the spare time courses to improve your professional chances or your personal skills. TV and internet you need to inform, entertain, or distract you. Eating at the restaurant or going to the discotheque are for fun. The household and laundry out of necessity. So all these activities serve an immediate obvious purpose. Yes, we would blush by saying that yesterday we have spent 2 hours with simply contemplating. Think about it. How often did you hear this from someone? Rarely to never. But most probably just these quiet moments in our existence are the ones in which sometimes very important discoveries are made and insight realization takes place. The moments in which the most incredible ideas are born. When do you think was the moment when Thomas A. Edison had his idea for an improved light bulb, like it is still used today in its basic form worldwide? Or in which moment had Patrick Suskind his idea for his novel masterpiece, The Perfume? Surely during one of these quiet moments. But the purpose of contemplating is not by force to have an epical groundbreaking idea. The result can be completely free of a purpose. It can be a simple intellectual game. A timeout in nonsense. An author who also picked up this theme and described it virtuously is Eric from in his book, To Have or to Be. Pedrito used to spend his time with fishing, one with carving figures out of wood. But often, very often, they simply sat there looking in the distance. Jonas assumed that they were indulging in their fantasies or scooping in a kind of meditation power for the passage. It also happened that they were playing for hours La Brisca together, an originally Italian cards game, which was also very popular in the Spanish-speaking territories. Or Pedrito played with them drafts. He even had a miniature version of the game Connect 4. One preferred to play chess with Jonas. During the whole week they played it, Jonas just managed once to beat him, and that evening one was drunk. Jonas had started to like these two guys with the time. There remained now only one day until they would arrive to the Spanish coast. They had managed well the time together. Despite of the difficulties and Jonas's doubts at the beginning, the relation to them had evolved in a good direction. They had become a well-working team, as Jonas helped vigorously where he could. He didn't want to just play the paying tourist who wanted to be attended and lay the whole day lazy on a deck chair. Therefore, he was very surprised that night as he heard about 3 a.m. a noise in front his cabin door. Someone was about to push down very carefully the door handle. Jonas still was able to hear it, or did he just hallucinate in his doze? But who could it be at this time, and what did he want? Was it maybe Pedrito, which had had a nightmare and now was afraid to stay in his cabin and therefore wanted to come to him? But why did he open so carefully the door, and wasn't he too old to react like that? Now the door had opened by a small gap. In the dim light that came from the hallway, he was able to recognize a tall silhouette. It had to be Juan. Panic started to creep up on him, as he still was lying stiff in his bed, like someone had bound him to the bed. The half-sleep still controlled his muscles and made it impossible to him to take over the motoric control of his body. He had to focus, to tear the invisible's bonds apart, to wake up, and to raise his arm in defense. Juan approached slowly step by step. In his hand he had something big that he applied over Jonas's face. It was a pillow. I can't get any air. My good, he will suffocate me. These thoughts were whirling around furiously in his head. He was still paralyzed, was still fighting the force that kept him under its spell and immobilized him. Suddenly he held up his right hand and grabbed Juan by his wrist. Then he raised his other hand and did the same. He flipped to the side and came standing next to Juan. Juan was clearly surprised and said angry, but, "Goddamn boy. Well, then let's do it the hard way. Afterwards maybe you won't be of use anymore." It's a pity. He took a knife out of the retainer that he had tied around his hip and attacked Jonas with it. Jonas wanted to grab something to defend himself, but he didn't see anything useful. Meanwhile, Juan pushed him further into the corner of the cabin. Now he was next to the lavatory. Abruptly, he grabbed the teeth-brush glass and threw it at Juan, but Juan evaded his attack skillfully. Now Jonas started to grab all the stuff that was lying around the lavatory and threw it at Juan, but he approached him nevertheless step by step. As Jonas stretched his arm out to give Juan a punch, he evaded it skillfully and slid him with his knife into the arm. My good, was that painful. Blood gushed out of his wound. Jonas gave up. He was about to faint. His death was inevitable. But why? He hadn't done him anything. Why? He fell backwards against the wall and his body started to sink down. Ready for the torero's final strike. Jonas closed his eyes. Suddenly Juan's arm sprang forward and jabbed with his knife into the wall 1 centimeter beside Jonas's carotid artery. But then Juan unexpectedly collapsed to the side and fell on the floor. Then he rattled the words, "You damned boy," before he closed his eyes forever, while he stared to the door where Pedrito was standing with a fish harpoon in his hands. By now Jonas noticed the harpoon, whose arrow had perforated Juan from behind. Pedrito approached Jonas and said to him while helping him up, "We have to bandage your wound, otherwise you will bleed to death." Jonas leaned on him and together they went back to the bed where he sat down. Then Pedrito left for a moment the cabin and returned quickly with a first aid box. Within a quarter hour he had stopped the bleeding and bandaged his arm. By now Jonas had recuperated enough to pronounce the words. What happened? Chapter 7. Some Confessions and a Farce. Pedrito seemed pretty serene concerning the recent happenings, while he helped Jonas to bandage his arm. Jonas still could not assume the events. Pedrito answered Jonas calm. "Well, sometimes things are not what they seem. That happened." "What do you mean by that?" answered Jonas him with a touch of anger. "One is not my dad. He gave me a place to stay 4 years ago, because after I had lost my mom I lived half a year on the street. One day I went along the docks and asked him if he had something to eat for me, and he asked me if I would be ready to sign up as a helpmate in exchange for food and housing. And so what? Is this all you got to tell me? No, there is more. One does not only deal with leather and handcrafted souvenirs or wines, but also with protected cultural goods from Colombia and with what? And with human organs. That, he made clear to me pretty soon. Sometimes it was me, sometimes him, who mixed a tranquilizer under the food of the alone traveling tourists like you, so that he could suffocate them by night with a pillow and sell afterwards their organs. But this is simply cannot be true. Organ transplantation has to be done fast and sterile, and we are here in the middle of the sea. To whom would he sell the organs? Until they are at their destination place, they are not any more useful. That's exactly our problem. In half an hour we will meet another ship. It carries a helicopter with a surgeon on board. He usually takes care of the organs removal during the flight to Rabat in Morocco. There is a clinic where rich people of Arabic countries get transplanted new organs. Hearts, kidneys, livers, or what else there is. The patients probably don't even know where these organs come from, but as long as everyone gets what he wants, all are happy. What? yelled Jonas. And what are we now supposed to do? They will kill us when they see that one is dead. Exactly. That's why we have to keep a clear head now. Keep a clear head. Boy, you were good. Why did you save me at all? You could have let one kill me right away. It would have been one and the same. Now you will get killed too. By the way, it would serve you right. With you it was different. You were different. Not like the other tourists. I could and would not continue like that. Therefore, I didn't give you any tranquilizer. If you help me, we can make it together. I have a plan, but for succeeding with it, I need your help. Jonas calmed down, and the rest of the time they spent with preparations for their big appearance, which would be at the same time dress rehearsal and world premiere in one, and eventually also their last performance. It was 4:20 a.m. as the ship of Captain Rice reached the one of Pedrito and Jonas. Pedrito was alone on deck, as Nazim, the boss of the organ dealers, shouted at him, "Take the cord and fix it on your ship." Pedrito obeyed him, and Nazim and some man of his troop came aboard their ship. The troop consisted of Qasim, the surgeon, who took the organs from the tourists; Teeming, a man strong like a bear, who was responsible for transshipping the other smuggler merchandise to their ship; Urwa, a wiry, nervous guy, who was Qasim's right hand; Rami, the sniper, who had taken place on top of the vantage point armed with his Steyr SSG-69 sniper rifle, while he remained on his ship together with Rice, the quiet and calm captain, who always was the pole of placidity in this operations, as he remained quiet and let the others act. "Where is Juan?" asked Nazim the young Pedrito in a harsh tone. "He is ill." "Ill? Are you kidding me, boy? Hey Juan, what is going on? Where is the tourist? You know that it has to be done fast, man." "Juan. Damned. I am here." And while he said that, he stuck his arm out of the porthole of his cabin and gave Nazim a sign. "Nazim, I am sick. I give a shit about that. Where's the merchandise? And come out of that hole." "Nazim, the usual smuggler goods are in boxes on deck, but I don't have any more the tourist. I had to get rid of him. Something went wrong." "What? What went wrong?" asked Nazim, enraged, and pushed Pedrito out of his way to approach Juan's cabin. Then he situated himself in front of Juan's cabin porthole and demonstrated clearly that he wanted instantly an answer. He could not see clear into the badly illuminated cabin. He didn't know that he saw Jonas disguised as Juan because he had his beret covering his face and wore Juan's coat. Nazim also did not notice it by his voice. The reason, therefore, was very probably that he had to speak Spanish with Juan, as this one did not understand another language and Nazim's mother tongue was Arabic. Therefore, he was not used to differentiate well a person's voice when someone was speaking another language. Juan hesitated with his answer, and then he said, unsure, "He attacked me and has injured my throat and my arms when I wanted to suffocate him. Somehow he was not sedated enough. It's Pedrito's fault, who apparently didn't give him enough sedative, but finally he rushed to help me and we had to kill him with the harpoon. He was not of use anymore as he totally bleed out. Next time we will succeed, this I promise you." Nazim ended Jonas his explanation in a submissive tone. "Where is he? As it happened shortly before, maybe we can still use some part of his body," said Qasim, and Urwa agreed by nodding. "We throwed him overboard so that the fish can eat him," said Jonas from his cabin. "Damned Juan. This can't be true. Do you know what this shit here costs us? Organizing the whole team, including the helicopter. It cost a fortune. I am truly sorry. I will deduct you this cost from your share. Did you understand that? Or you will deliver me the next tourist free. And you, don't stay around and start with your work," shouted he at Teeming, who immediately started to transship the boxes with the smuggleware to their ship. Nazim went over to Pedrito and pushed him brusquely to the floor while shouting, "You miserable idiot." Suddenly he saw Jonas's bicycle, which he had placed on deck and forgotten there. "Look at this. Is this your bicycle, boy?" Pedrito was noticeably surprised and did not know what to answer. He stuttered only, "Oh no, it's—" "Leave the bicycle where it is, Nazim. I will punish the boy myself later for his mistake," shouted Jonas from his cabin. Nazim went unperturbed to the bicycle, took it into his hand and said, "This is a nice bicycle and I do not care whom it belongs to. My daughter will like it." He took the bicycle and went over to the wooden footbridge, which they had placed between the two ships. "Leave the bicycle where it is, Nazim," shouted Jonas now with a louder voice. Nazim turned around to taint him, as he suddenly got frightened when he saw that one was pointing at him a fish harpoon. He hesitated and said, Rami will kill you with his sharpshooter rifle before you have a chance to pull the trigger, won't you, Rami? I doubt that he will be able to hit me down here, Nazim. Nazim raised his head and looked up to Rami and saw how he shook his head, negating his question. Enervated, Nazim pushed the bicycle into Pedrito's direction, which was barely able to jump away before the bicycle crashed into the ship's wall. Shortly later, Nazim and his group were again back on their ship and pulling back the wooden footbridge. Nazim left them with an ambiguous, "We will meet again in the reign of the sherry." "Phew, that was close," said Jonas and Pedrito simultaneously as Nazim's ship was out of view. They cooled down and Jonas checked the bicycle. He was relieved when he detected that everything was still okay and that the valuable content was not leaking out of it. A short time later, they landed like previewed in Kittas at the port El Puerto Comercial, where they already were expected. One had pre-organized the whole trip very well. The two buyers for the handcrafted souvenirs and the leather already waited at the port. They asked some curious questions regarding Juan's whereabouts, but with the simple explanation that he was lying sick in his cabin, they were satisfied, particularly as they were overall interested in the merchandise and not so much on Juan himself. So their question was more out of politeness than out of real care. Jonas presented himself as helpful new assistant and helped loading the merchandise on the merchants' camions. When Pedrito held the money for the merchandise in his hands, he nearly gleamed over his face. Then he took Juan's handy out of his pocket and called the nearby situated Bodega Grant to inform them of their arrival. Juan had chosen this wine manufacturer because he was situated in Puerto de Santa Maria and therefore nearby the ship port. "You can bring us now the usual delivery," said Pedrito friendly and added some verbiage. It was Juan's habit to order the wines of the circumjacent regions Condado de Huelva, Malaga, and Jerez only then when he received the money for his delivered goods. The whole transaction was always calculated very narrow, therefore he saw himself forced to proceed that way. The most popular wine from this region is probably the sherry wine. In fact, sherry means nothing else than Jerez. The curious change of name happened in the 17th century because the English, who since the 16th century until today are one of the most important buyers of wine from this region, simply could not pronounce the word Jerez. The region of Jerez makes wine since more than 3,000 years. During the affiliation to the Roman Empire, huge quantities of wine were exported. Surprisingly, the cultivation and distribution of wine remained in Christian hands during the Mauritanian occupation. Today's sherry is a trademark, which only can be used for wines from the regions Jerez de la Frontera, Sanlúcar de Barrameda, and El Puerto de Santa Maria. When Jonas and Pedrito had loaded the wine onto their ship, they both went together to the nearby beach of Valdellagrana to celebrate their victory over the adversities with a good meal and to say goodbye to each other. Pedrito went from the beach back to his ship, and Juan went to the nearby Renfe railway station. His next stage was the French border. Chapter 8, Liberty, Equality, Brotherhood, and a little bit of Surrealism. It was a long, almost 2 days trip by train going through Sevilla, Córdoba, Madrid, Zaragoza, and Barcelona until Figueres, where he finally went relaxed off the train. Jonas had absorbed during these days a lot of the Spanish countryside into his mind. He especially liked the interaction of the color tones of the vegetation. It transmitted him a feeling of savageness and impression of virginity, which he sensed as freedom. The contrary to what he felt at home when he sat on his mountain bike and rode through the woods. Everything was so tidy, proper, and lovely in Switzerland, but one thing he always missed, the sense of virginity and the herewith correlated feelings of adventure and freedom. One day he noticed that even the plates signalizing the directions in the woods, which often were very useful when he wanted to improvise a ride with the bike, were furbished. Who'd care about that? Probably the forest warden, or were they built like that, so the dirt did not stick on them? Well, why was he in Figueres, a small 40,000-inhabitant village? On the one side, Figueres was only 25 kilometers away from the French border, and on the other side, he was here because of Salvador Dali, probably the most well-known citizen this village had ever had. Before he would cross the border, he wanted to see in any case the Teatro Museo Dali, the theater that had been converted into a museum by Dali himself, as he was a huge fan of Dali. The theater was the memorable place where Dali's pictures were exposed for the first time when he was 14. He then converted the former theater with the approval of the governor to a museum, which finally opened its doors in 1974. Dali was Jonas's favorite artist, probably because he felt reminded through his pictures at the visual experiences he had had when he was on a marijuana or LSD high. Dolly had been buried in the crypt of the museum after his death in 1989. When Jonas stood in front of the museum, he thought, "This is typically Dolly." The roof was decorated with giant eggs. After a 3-hour tour, where he also visited Dolly's crypt, Jonas left the museum to prepare himself for crossing the border to France. He went to the railway station and changed in a nearby situated bank a few of his Swiss traveler checks into French francs and ate afterwards a light meal. Then he bought a road map of Europe and a train ticket to Portbou, from where he wanted to start his border crossing with his bicycle. During his trip to Portbou, he passed by a village named Cholera, and he asked himself if the village was named like that because maybe once there had been a cholera epidemic in the village, or if the village was maybe mainly populated by choleric inhabitants. He had to smile when having these thoughts. In the evening, he finally arrived at Portbou. Now he was only a few kilometers away from the French border. The tension started to get noticeable in his stomach. Therefore, he ate something and bought some provisions for the trip in a store. Equipped with his bicycle and his backpack, he started his trip determined to make it. He drove over the Avinguda de Franca mountain to the French border, which was about 3 kilometers away. The road winded itself up the hill, and it cost him some effort to advance with the foldable bike as it had only 3 gears. The whole effort reminded him at a bicycle tour, which he had undertaken with a colleague. They had met in the military, they had smoked some joints together, and found out that they shared the same passion for mountain bike driving. And so it came that one day Jonas came to Thomas's house in Ormelingen with the purpose to make together a bicycle tour. Jonas was skeptical at the beginning because of the bad weather, as it already was beginning of November, but Thomas assured him that he knew the terrain and that the weather would be fine. Jonas felt ashamed when he saw the 4,000 Swiss francs expensive bicycle of his friend Thomas. It was the high-end brand Klein, and compared to the bicycle of Jonas, Cannondale, of which he was until now very proud, Thomas's bike was a Rolls-Royce. The tour led them from Ruthenfloh to Anwil and Kienberg, and they mastered a lot of altitude meters. While Jonas was losing increasingly his power, Thomas pedaled lively forward. Jonas instead started to have cramps, especially in the right leg, so that he saw himself repeatedly forced to go off the bike and walk. He also lost completely his orientation and had the impression to be since an eternity on the road. When he realized that they had reached Erlensbach and he later saw the bridge of Arau, he was absolutely frustrated as he knew that they had 25 kilometers ahead of them to reach back home, and that under bad weather conditions. Jonas started to curse Thomas, and he made him the reproach that it had not been necessary to prove him like that Thomas was the more sportive one of them both. When he also noticed that both of them had no money to go back by train, his motivation sank to the basement. After endless exertions like occasionally rain and snow, coldness, wet clothes, hunger, and cramps, they finally reached Thomas's home. Practically without interchanging a word with Thomas, Jonas stuck his bike in the station wagon of his father and said, "Hopefully we see us never again." Since then he never again did a bike tour with someone else, as he wanted from then to cycle at his chosen velocity and only under good weather conditions. The pains this time should not last long, as the Col de Ballesters mountain was only 165 meters high. Finally, the customs came in sight. The decision of the European Union, which went effective in 1995 and allowed the free movement of persons between the member nations, was also in the interest of Jonas's intent, and therefore he did not fear to be stopped at the customs. Nevertheless, he had chosen this complicated way to cross the border, on the one side to have the occasion to visit Dolly's museum, and on the other side because he feared that he would have been controlled in the train by the customs, especially when someone had his appearance, as he had neglected his body hygiene lately. The whole action of crossing the border with the bicycle should be an additional precaution measure. Afterwards, he would take again the train and repeat the same action briefly before the Swiss border. And therefore he was noticeably relieved when he approached the former customs and he found out that it was guarded. He crossed the border, and finally he could cycle downhill. Down the hill called the Ballesters to the village Cerbera along the 3 kilometers long Route de l'Espagne. After this effort, Jonas wanted to grant himself some fun. On the first best occasion, he turned right and cycled down to the beach. It was a small bay and no one was there. A small beach bar with a covered forecourt and some chairs raised his attention. He crossed the cordon to the forecourt, took one of the chairs from a staple and sat in it. It did not disturb him that the bar was already closed. Instead, he took a sandwich out of his rucksack and started to eat it up, while he enjoyed the nightly view on the sea, which was illuminated by the full moon. After 20 minutes, he suddenly heard from his left side a voice that shouted in French, "What are you doing there?" He got scared and looked abruptly in the direction where the voice came from. Then he instantly stood up because what was coming towards him agitated him. He saw a muscular guy with dark hair, which looked like a bodybuilder, approaching him with fast steps together with a huge black dog. His thoughts were, "Do not panic now. Be friendly. Talk to him in French." Then he said, pacifying to the bodybuilder, "Hello, I only sat down here without causing any damage." But the guy did not answer him. Instead, he approached him even faster. Now the tall guy suddenly stood in front of him, powerful and terrifying together with his beast that could have been Cerberus, the guard dog from the Greek mythology, which was guarding the entry to the hell named Hades. The beast seemed to be a crossing between a Rottweiler and a St. Bernard dog, tall and athletic at the same time, like his master. "Sir, Further he did not reach. The bodybuilder hit him with his fist directly in the face. Only Jonas's excellent reaction bewaired him of being hit by the fist with its full intensity. As he turned his head to the left, he only got streaked on his cheek, but still he floundered backwards and was barely able to stand on his feet. Panic overwhelmed him. Where should he head now? What would happen when the guy released the dog? He looked to the left where he had left his bicycle and ran towards it, picked it up, and started to run over the sand, heading to the street. The bodybuilder still stood on the same spot like the Colossus of Rhodes. When would he release the dog? Now. The beast started to run towards him. He had to reach at any price the street. A dog can reach a maximum speed of 50 kilometers per hour and hold this speed up for several hundred meters. On longer courses, he still can keep up 30 to 35 kilometers per hour. Usually a dog hounds its prey until it is totally exhausted and becomes an easy catch. He had succeeded. Jonas jumped on his bike and began to pedal like crazy. The beast came closer to him. Closer and closer. It was now running beside him and trying to snap his feet with his fangs. Jonas tried to kick it, while he still somehow managed to pedal with the other foot and shouted constantly, "Fuck off, you damned beast." The beast let off of him for a moment, and Jonas profited from the occasion to flee. Again he pedaled like crazy, like there was nothing else to do in this world. After an eternity, he slowed down and looked back. The beast was gone. He had succeeded to outdistance it. Thank you, God. But suddenly he cried out loud, "No, it can't be true. Damned, damned, damned," he shouted out loud. If someone had seen him, they would have taken him as crazy. The realization that he had left behind his backpack with his clothes, his money, and his passport at the beach bar hit him like a blizzard. It simply could not be true. What now? The bloody bodybuilder surely right now is rolling on the floor with laughter. Why? Why did this happen to him now? Then when he thought he had exceeded the worst, and now this shit. He had to go back. Maybe there was a slight hope. Maybe the stupid bodybuilder just wanted to frighten him away and left his rucksack in peace. He waited 2 hours. 2 miserable long hours where he thought about what he could do if the rucksack was not there anymore. Go to the police? Surely not, as it had been him who had trespassed into the secluded area of the beach bar. Actually, that was the reason for his misery. Should he go to the consulate? Well, probably they did even not have one in this miserable dump village. And then? How should he explain to his parents that he goes on a trip to South America and emerges later robbed in France? The whole law would have leaked out. Therefore, he decided to hold out. Maybe there was still a slight hope left. 2 hours later, he could get certitude. The dawn already had raised. He had hidden his bike nearby and sneaked up to the beach bar. From a distance, he surveyed the bar for around 15 minutes, but he could not notice anything suspicious. Slowly and crouching, he sneaked up to the bar. There on the sand in front of the beach bar was lying something. It had to be his rucksack. He approached and saw his clothes dispersed on the sand. He started to pick them up and stuff them into the rucksack, while he constantly looked around cautiously. Hope started to sprout in him. He quickly searched the floor of the beach bar and then returned to his bike. Then he reached into the pocket of his rucksack where he had stowed his money and passport. He found nothing. He felt the other pockets. Still nothing. Damned, also the camera was gone. The bodybuilder had taken everything of value. Probably he had taken out all valuable items before he had handed over the rest to his beast to tear it up. What now? Well, there was nothing else left, and he had no better idea than trying to get a lift back to Switzerland by car from someone. He studied his road map and drove then over the country road D914 to the next bigger village, Argile-sur-Mer, to get from there to Lubulu, where the freeway A9 passed by. He figured out that his chances to get a lift would be higher there as in a small village. He managed the 25 kilometers to Argile-sur-Mer in more than an hour by bike, but afterwards he felt totally floppy. The whole situation reminded him dramatically at the traumatic mountain bike tour, but still he started brave with the next 20 kilometers stage. Let's go to Bulu. Now it is not the time to give up. There is still a chance. At least I got the road maps and hence I am not completely disoriented, he thought by himself. When he finally arrived at the big marked place, he would have loved to kneel down and beg for some food. So enormous was his hunger, but his pride was bigger, therefore he asked a merchandiser if he could give him some of the spoiled fruits. The old man had compassion with him and gave him 3 kilograms of good apples. They started a talk and Jonas told him that he was doing a pilgrimage and that he now was back on his way home, but he had no money left to buy some food and his strength had also left him. The old man, who seemed to be free of distrustfulness, gave him the advice to wait nearby the petrol station and ask someone who was on his way back to Switzerland for a lift. There are a lot of Spanish and Portuguese people who drive by here and sometimes they stop for fuel, said the merchandiser. Jonas did like the merchandiser had recommended him, but the fuel station clerks did not like it, that he camped nearby the station and started to speak up to every car that had Swiss registration plates. They soon chased him away, but he opened his camp not far away at the slip road to the highway where the station clerks couldn't see him from inside. In this situation he had to hold out, feeding himself with apples and hoping for a Samaritan who would give him a lift. He felt sick of diarrhea and had to sneak up several times to the toilet of the fuel station to relieve him and quench his thirst, but what worried him most was the fact that he was running out of provisions and that until now the car drivers did not pay attention to him or just turned down his request for a lift. The less of them was even willing to listen to his request, and if they did their reaction was negating or they signalized him by pointing with their fingertip on their temple that he was crazy if he thought that somebody would give him a lift in these untrustworthy trappings he was wearing. They were right, and he even wasn't mad at them. But on the third day, destiny seemed to have mercy with him and sent him a lonely traveling Portuguese, which was on his way back to Geneva. Oh, home, sweet home. The young man was willing to give him a lift to Switzerland. He said he needed company for the purpose to not fall asleep while driving, and Jonas truly promised him to be a good conversational partner during their trip. The journey would lead them through Montpellier, Nîmes and Lyon, and finally to Geneva. It turned out that the young Portuguese, Nuno was his name, worked in Switzerland as an office clerk in a forwarding agency. They already had driven 30 kilometers as their conversation, which at the beginning was rather superficial, slowly switched to a subject, which Jonas did not please at all. Nuno started to complain about the fact that even if he was born and raised in Switzerland, he felt not accepted fully. Jonas did not make any comments. His situation was too bad to get into a discussion with Nuno about immigrants, integration, etc. I am asking myself why someone who was born and raised in Switzerland still is called by the Swiss an immigrant and treated correspondingly. Generally, I hear the word immigrant so often, like in Switzerland. I did not detect that the people and media use in Portugal the word immigrant so often like in Switzerland, said Nuno excited. Jonas still remained silent. He thought, let him rage himself out. Soon he will stop talking about this topic. Nuno now also started to be silent, until he said suddenly with rage in his voice, if you think you can evade a discussion about this topic by being silent, then you are mistaken. Also when you talk back to me saying, I don't want to discuss, or go back to Portugal if you don't like it in Switzerland, then you are completely wrong. You will tell me now what you think about that what I said, or I kick you out of the car right here in the middle of nowhere. Did you hear me? Shouted he suddenly at Jonas. Things started to get out of hand. Damn it. The whole activity stood under a bad star from the beginning on. I shouldn't have done all this. I am an idiot. Why? Why do you do this to my God? This guy must be crazy, thought Jonas to himself in his desperation. Well now, I really don't want to argue with you. Why are we having a fight at all? You have told me your opinion, and I have listened to it. It is that simple, isn't it? No, it is not that simple, because you do not tell me what you think. You do not bring yourself in the discussion. You are just silent, and with that you are boycotting the conversation. Yes, but why does my opinion matter to you? What does such a conversation benefit you at all? It benefits me a lot, because in a real conversation you would also have to give in to my arguments. You would have to find a fitting answer to that what I say. That is unlikely more difficult than simply be silent and keep your opinion to yourself. This is why I demand an answer from you. A real one, an appropriate one, and not a cheap excuse. Jonas hesitated but said then, "Are you out of your mind?" Nuno went silent. Then after a while he said with a grinning over his face and a gloatingly undertone, "It is time for you to get off the car." And when saying that he braked abruptly the tires squeaked and the car came to a stop. Then Nuno steered slowly the car to the breakdown lane. "I think you are really crazy, you idiot." As soon as Jonas had said that, Nuno gave him a slap in the face. "Shit, man. Okay, I get off the car. Fuck off." Jonas got off the car. He went to the trunk to get out the bike, which they had stored there with difficulties. In the moment where he wanted to hit the button to open the trunk, the car went off. Jonas was extremely surprised, but then he shouted in agony, "Please, don't do this to me. I will talk. I will talk to you. Please come back." And then he fell on his knees. The car still drove further away. He drove about 400 meters until he came to a stop. Jonas instantly stood up and ran towards the car. Out of breath, he came nearer to it. When he was about 10 meters away from it, the car again drove away. "Please stop it. Give me at least my bicycle back." The car stopped again. Jonas ran again towards it. He reached the trunk and pushed the button to open it. "Do you want to talk now?" did he hear Nuno say. Jonas paused, and then he simply replied, "Yes." He simply did no more energy left to lose everything and to risk remaining without money and papers alone on the highway. Therefore, he decided to give in to Nuno's unusual demand for a discussion on which he insisted tenaciously. "Then get into the car." Jonas got into the car and Nuno drove away. 10 minutes long they were silent, and then Jonas started to say, "I thought that you wanted to talk? This was only a test. If you would have been silent another 10 minutes, I would have dumped you definitively." "Okay, now listen to me. I have planned the course of our discussion as follows. The whole thing will run off similar to a match. Each of us can start a verbal attack, which the other has to repel. Afterwards, we make a rating. If no one has any arguments left, or if one of us gives up, the discussion is finished. The one who has reached more points has won," presented Nuno proud his idea of a discussion. In the eyes of Jonas, Nuno was really crazy. Only a mad person could have such an idea. The whole happening since his visit at the Dali Museum in Figueres had evolved increasingly into surrealistic forms. Jonas ignored that as a matter of fact in British and American high schools, actually so-called debate clubs have a long tradition. Furthermore, lessons in debating are part of the education plan to train the rhetorical knowledge. It is proved that students who are in a debate club are able to point out and justify their opinion better. The improved ability of speech fortifies also the self-consciousness and supports the personal development. While debating, the participants have to stick to a subject and within defend a certain position. In contest debates, the speakers also get rated by jurors. The topic is told to them shortly before the beginning of the debate. The pro and contra positions are drawn by lot. The following is being rated if the arguments are creative, relevant, and difficult to counter. If there is a clear structure in the argumentation, the self-presentation, and if a contestant is evading the opponent by leaving unanswered his questions, or if you do not enter into the adversary's arguments, how the time is being allotted, and if you do not exceed the time limit. Chapter 9. The Discussion Debate. I start and repeat here with my first argument, on which you did not want to answer. Why is someone who was born and raised in Switzerland and has visited all schools there, and even learned a profession there, still is being called an immigrant? Started Nuno the debate. Very simple. Because you do not have the Swiss nationality and your parents neither do, countered Jonas. But why do such persons not get automatically the Swiss nationality like this is the case in other countries like, for example, Great Britain, France, or America? Each country has its own laws and the right to regulate things its way. Other countries, other customs. Nuno hesitated, and then he added, "You are right, the definition of an immigrant seems not to be regulated uniform. The score is 0-0. A custom that is strongly connected to the subject of immigrants is the use of the word racism to express a general hostility against immigrants. The definition of racism contains in its core the doctrines of the race theory and therewith a destructive element, meaning that extreme racists demand an extinction of other races. Whereas the word xenophobia is much more adequate for the mentioned hostility against immigrants. The word etymology is Greek and refers to the fear against foreigners, which results in fear, avoiding, exclusion, disadvantaging, mockery, and hostility of foreigners. In the daily use, the people use mostly the word racism and mean in fact xenophobia. Why do so many immigrants not integrate themselves correctly? Instead, they isolate themselves, do not learn the language, and ignore our rights and customs, asked Jonas on his part. Nuno paused a moment until he answered. This is a complex question. Regarding the isolating. On a first view, you are right, but isn't that human? People like mostly to talk with similar people from their own country. The same do the Germans, English, or Swiss immigrants when they immigrate to Majorca. They construct their own colonies, remain among them, do not learn even after 10 years the language, print even their own newspapers in German, hear German-speaking radio broadcast stations, and watch German-speaking TV channels. That is the same. Not completely. These people you are talking about are mostly pensioners. They are not any more young and into the working life. It is not so important that they integrate themselves. Well, what is about the well-educated Anglophone immigrants in Switzerland? Some of them are since many years in Switzerland. Still, they do not speak a word German and are even proud of it, as the Swiss adapt to them. As it is so hip to speak English. The Swiss like English so much that in the bigger cities they even show the movies in English with German and French subtitles, even if the movies are available in German or French audio. My God, where has something like that seen before? Those are not attacked, although it would be exactly these people, which judged from their grade of education should be best able to learn a further language. But the contrary is the case. Exactly these people care the less to learn a foreign language. Instead, you prefer to criticize the other immigrants, which live since many years in Switzerland and do not learn German, but you forget one important detail. These people have a much lower school education. It is unlikely more difficult for them to learn a new language, as they mostly do not manage well their own one, but still they do a good, valuable, and indispensable job. I never looked at it that way. Your argumentation is conclusive. The score is now 1 o'clock for you, said Jonas without malice. Why do the immigrants commit much more crimes than the Swiss natives? Asked Jonas provocatively. What do you mean by more crimes? The media try to do their best to modify the emotional view on the facts just by mentioning the nationality of a delinquent, even if the nationality is not a relevant information to describe the circumstances of the offense. The mentioning of the nationality arises in the heads of the readers the impression that crimes are committed constantly by immigrants. I think the journalists are also only human. They are not so objective, like they should be, and they know very well the power they have over people with their words when they write their articles. The amount of committed crimes by immigrants is surely not higher than the amount committed by Swiss natives, closed Nuno his argumentation. There you are mistaking. I know the figures. From the about 90,000 crimes per year, 51% were committed by Swiss and 49% by immigrants. But there you see, said Nuno impatiently. Wait a moment. The problem is that there are 6.5 million Swiss natives and 1.2 million immigrants in Switzerland. You see what I mean? 1.2 million immigrants commit half of the crimes in Switzerland. Nuno felt a little glum. Why do you know these figures so exactly? It is somehow strange. You see, it fits to what I said. The subject immigrant is in Switzerland an ongoing public topic, defended Nuno himself. And by the way, I think that the increased criminality of immigrants is a defiance reaction caused by the daily marginalization they experience. Well, some years ago I wrote a school essay regarding that topic. Since then the figures did not change significantly, but you have evaded during your argumentation constantly my question towards you. I think the score would now be 1-1, even if your last argument surely is not wrong, but it is a guess, which is hard to prove. With his guess for the causes of the increased criminality of immigrants, Nuno was not lying wrong. As reason for the criminality of immigrants and minorities in a society, their marginalization should not be underestimated, and it is therewith connected low chances for promotion and future perspectives. That is the reason why some of them try to provide themselves their share of wealth and a better life by taking the path of crime, what surely is not the right way. On the other side, also there is a high share of criminal tourists included in the figure of crimes committed by immigrants. This means that people from abroad enter the country with the purpose to stay only temporarily in it. During this stage, they try to snatch up as much as possible by committing criminal acts. This circumstance is often kept secret by the media, so that as a result, in total, the public has a worse image of immigrants and minorities. The Intentionally keeping secret of these circumstances can be used for underlay the own xenophobic tendencies with arguments. Jonas knew the backgrounds of the circumstances, but he wanted to book this point for him. Therefore, he did not mention them. Nuno got angry. His temper went through with him. He did not stick anymore to the debating rules imposed by him and started to argue. This is bullshit. You know perfectly well that as an immigrant you are being discriminated. Sometimes it is being handled subtle, for example when you look for a rental apartment or a job, or if it is about the salary. And sometimes the antipathy is shown directly and brutally when some immigrants are beaten up by some neo-Nazis or people of the extreme right wing. Did you never see this coverage where they wrote the same application forms to 400 companies? Once with a Swiss name on it and once with an Albanian name. The fictive Swiss candidate got 170 answers, the Albanese only 30. Damn it. There you have the proof. Look, I think it is normal that the native population is being favored. Each nation does it. Or do you want to tell me that Portugal would not act that way, that they would give the immigrants the better jobs? In Switzerland, the immigrants in total are living a good life, compared to other countries like Dubai where they get treated like dirt. Also, did we never go out into the world to colonize other populations or to suppress and exploit them, like for example the Portuguese did in Africa and Brazil? Both remain silent. You know, sometimes your behavior looks to me like a subtle colonization. A modern variant of colonization according to the motto, either you are absolutely conforming to us or you are against us. I simply want to have the same chances as a Swiss guy. Is it my fault that my parents immigrated to Switzerland 30 years ago? No. I did not choose my destiny by myself. I was born into it. Now I cannot simply return to Portugal and behave like nothing happened, like I was raised in Portugal. That is why the argument, go back to Portugal if you do not like it in Switzerland, makes me always so angry. It is not that easy like changing a pair of shorts. Nuno's voice changed hearable with the last words he spoke. Jonas looked out of his eye angles over to him, but he kept his head still straight, so that Nuno did not notice that he was looking at him. Nuno now had watered eyes and his voice began to tremble. You know what I would like most would be that there were no nations anymore. No nations, no borders, no nationalities anymore. In Jonas' opinion, Nuno got with his statements increasingly surrealistic, but he decided to let him talk. What do you think about that idea? That would be something, wouldn't it? Or a completely different idea. Everyone goes back to his country of origin. There would be no immigrants anymore, but also no tourists and immigrants. Everyone at his place. Everyone stays in the country where he belongs to, and then this damned constant discussion about immigrants would finally stop. What do you think about that idea? Jonas waited a while and considered his words well, and then he said, these are interesting ideas, but also very utopian ones. People will always feel the necessity for being part of a group, for borders and demarcation, and also for leaving their country. Even if this is contradictory, life is ambivalent by itself. The migration also has its good sides. A lot of cultural achievements were exported that way from one culture to the other and have aided to the prosperousness of the whole humanity. And think about the economic markets. The economy would slack down and that would do all of us more damage than advantage. You are right, but it is permitted to daydream. You know this will now sound stupid, but I would have liked it best to simply be born as a Swiss. That would have spared me the whole dilemma of my life. I am so tired of my situation. I can simply not get easily rid of the feeling to be disadvantaged. It often paralyses me and makes me sad. The discussion between the both of them now had taken a different direction, a psychotherapeutic one. Jonas realized that the moment Nuno started to complain with tears in his eyes saying, is it my fault that my parents immigrated because of economic reasons? Looking back, I think it would have been better if they hadn't done it. Today's the other part of our family, those who remained in Portugal, are living economical almost equal to my parents, even if they did not take the risk of immigration. Instead, my parents were humiliated during many years by humbly fulfilling poorly paid jobs without ever contradicting when they were treated unfair. All these years they were torn apart between two cultures. And nowadays? Well, today they are practically alone there after they returned to Portugal. And the relatives turned out to be rather unpleasant persons, one after the other. But back in time when we brought them yearly some presents in form of chocolate and Swiss Army knives, they were our best friends. Looking backwards, we detected that we practically had to buy us their affection. Maybe because they were at that time jealous at us, but now that they are at the same economic level, they show their real face. Among them, they are also all of them arguing and allied in a complicated network. It is to wine, did he continue. Do you know how they called me as a boy in Portugal? O Sueco, that means the Swiss guy. Imagine that. There I was the Swiss and here the immigrant. Isn't that simply tragic? Nuno watched in Jonas's direction and saw how he agreed with him by nodding. In fact, I always hated the journeys there. I always got sick when we went there by bus or car. My sister too. Standing every year these damn boring 4 weeks together with our grandparents, which even didn't have a TV. Only an old radio with a terrible reception. Everything was in such a bad shape. I had few friends there. In fact, it was only one. His name was Oscar. He paused a minute. Last year he died on a borreliosis. Imagine that. The Swiss doctors would have noticed it easily, and there a guy dies with 30 years because of a stupid bite of a tick. That shows me once again how retarded they are there. That's why I never would return back there. I prefer to carry the burden of being an immigrant here in Switzerland. Why do you still go there on holidays? Dared Jonas to ask him. He didn't want to provoke him. His question based on real interest. Well, that is a good question. Probably it has to do with my education. With that, what my parents taught me during the past 20 years, and that what I learned by watching them. They always drove there to visit their relatives. I do now the same by visiting my parents. My sister is different. She is married to an Italian and only goes around every 2 years for a visit. More a courtesy visit. Mostly she remains only a short time there. MHM confirmed Jonas and signalized that he had understood what Nuno tried to tell him. Nuno instead continued with his monologue. There was no stopping him. Like an emotional dam that broke and overflowed of emotions, he continued to tell. If you ever asked yourself how all these immigrants manage to nourish 2 or 3 kids with their low salaries, then you will find out now. My parents cleaned beside their regular jobs after work 2 offices and also did the janitor job in our block. They were a kind of self-appointed modern working slaves. Holidays. Like told, only to Portugal. With envy, I always listened to the holiday experiences of my Swiss school comrades. Those went always to different destinations and mostly by plane, unlike we who spent 30 hours in a bus or car to reach our destination. Did you find out why your parents were so miserly? Asked Jonas carefully. Yes, I did, or let's say I have an assumption, which is highly probable. The reason lies within the fact that they were raised in poor circumstances. You can't imagine how poor. I remember when they once showed us the houses of their youth in an abandoned mountain village, I felt myself relegated into the medieval age. I almost got a stroke. The houses were made of stone, and that is why they bought for the parents of my mother with their first earned money a better house in another village. That's where we went always on holidays. The parents of my father died early when I was a baby. Yes, all that is difficult to imagine from my point of view, but I believe you fully. With believing what I told you, you have touched an important aspect. Can you imagine how lousy I always felt compared to the Swiss? All this crap you cannot tell someone. Most people wouldn't even believe something like that, or they would laugh at me forever, or call me an absolute hillbilly. I never invited one of my few Swiss school friends to my home because I was so ashamed of our poor rental apartment. My disgrace only decreased slowly during all the years when I found out that the other kids of immigrants went through the same. Especially when comparing my situation to the one of my Spanish, Portuguese, and Italian friends, I could detect that they often felt and experienced almost the same like me. That must be the reason why several immigrants have developed a strong patriotism and glorification of their native country to suppress those aspects mentioned by you and they elevate themselves, through Jonas, into the discussion. Your conclusion is surely certain. Such behavior gives you a feeling of social cohesion and belonging, and it shields you against people outside the group, but it seems to me that the Swiss do the same. What do you mean with that? Jonas was irritated, as he had assumed that the hostile form of discussion was over, therefore he was very irritated by Nuno's comment. I don't want to bother you long with what I will tell you now. It only shall serve you as stimulation for your own thoughts. Like I told you, we all learn a lot from our parents. This can be moral concepts or stereotype behavior. Like the Swiss laugh at stereotype behavior of immigrants, we laugh at Swiss quirks. Sometimes there is very ridiculous and incomprehensible stereotype behavior. Number 1. The pilgrimage to Australia or South America. It seems that at least once in his lifetime a Swiss has to visit one of these regions. It is incredible to me how many Swiss told me that they have visited one of these 2 regions. Why? Are those regions a kind of Mecca to you? Number 2. The continuous further education. Each second Swiss seems to be constantly involved in a further education. Don't you people just feel the need to relax when you come home after work? Number 3. Holidays. Generally a predominant present topic. I think that in no other country people talk so much about holidays and plan them so early in advance. I can't understand the whole circus the Swiss do about this subject. My grandparents and several other hundred millions or maybe billions of people never did some holidays in their lives, but in Switzerland this is an absolute central subject of the common life. And as mentioned, number 4, the immigrants. The subject with which our whole discussion started. An extremely annoying and ongoing subject like the holidays. But I think that we have reached now the end of our debate. Jonas was relieved when Nuno said that. Regarding the subject holidays, here's some further information for the interested reader, which is willing to expand his point of view. Usually in the USA you get 14, in Australia 17, and in Canada 19 paid holiday days. China has the pole position regarding generosity. If you are working since 1 to 10 years for the same company, you get paid 5 days off. If you are working since 10 to 20 years for the same employer, you get paid 10 days off, and only if you are working more than 20 years for the same company, you get paid 15 days off. On the other end of the scale, you find extremes like Germany or France where people get usually paid 30+ days per year. In Switzerland, the law obliges to give the employees 20 paid days, but most companies give their employees up to 25 days. But also the Europeans had to learn how to do holidays, and it is not so long ago. 1936 holidays were invented by the French. The socialistic parties pushed through that the workers got 2 weeks paid holidays from their employers. In Switzerland, paid holidays were introduced stepwise and regulated in a federalism way individually by the particular companies and branches. Later followed the cantonal holiday regulations. In Zurich first in 1952. Prior to the First World War, the common opinion in Switzerland was that the military service was a comfortable and varied recreation compared to the regular work in the office. Chapter 10, on detours to Helvetia. After the debate, silence spread out among the two opponents. Both of them used the time to work up the things they had heard from each other. For Jonas, it was scary to detect that there were obviously several people like Nuno living in Switzerland. People who were extremely unhappy with their situation of life. People who were without roots and who practically lived a life of a zombie. A human cocoon that moves through life, but inside it is joyless and frustrated and contains a lot of envy, bitterness, and hostility. He had a complete different point of view regarding the immigrants. Some of their worries resembled in some points to his worries, but he never had thought that some immigrants went through so much agony. That they had experienced things which were self-evident for him in a complete other way. That they were dragging such a burden on them. Also, he got remorse when he thought about the subject criminal immigrants in the debate, while he was carrying 3 kilograms of cocaine with him. To the joy of Jonas, both started to talk again some hours later. This time they stuck to the typical everyday small talk subjects like work, girlfriends, and activities in the spare time. To his surprise, he found out that they had both similar opinions and done similar experiences. About 40 to 50 kilometers before arriving to the Swiss border, at Bourg-en-Bresse, nearby Geneva, Jonas said to Nuno, "You know what? You can dump me in the next village. I will drive further with my bicycle." Nuno was surprised. Why that now? There is no particular reason for it. I just feel like. I knew it. Something is wrong with you. Are you being searched by the police? Nuno almost hit the nail on the head, but Jonas remained rigid. You think? Repelled Jonas. Come on. Spit it out. Don't make it so exciting. What have you done? Look, I don't want to bring both of us into trouble. It would be better for both of us if you do not cross the border with me, okay? Okay, you stubborn buck. You are treating your secrets with the well-known Swiss bank confidentiality. As soon he had said that, he started to laugh. After he had calmed down, he added, "Take the map that is lying in the glove compartment and pick out a place where I shall dump you." Jonas did like told. After 5 minutes, he had found a suitable place. Well, you can drive on the highway after a Chatillon and Michael. Then we go over the country road to Pawnee. There you can drop me, and you self can drive comfortable over the border, and will arrive directly to Geneva. Is that okay for you? Sure. Your wish is my command, master. And then he started to laugh again. Chapter 11, The Hunter and His Prey. The moment when Nuno dropped Jonas off at Pawnee, which was really a dump, as it didn't consist of more than 5 jumbled streets, Jonas started to worry. He cordially said goodbye to Nuno. During the trip, they had stopped previously at a rest house. He even had received from Nuno a fresh T-shirt, and he had taken a shower and shaved himself. Nevertheless, the worryingly feeling did not want to go away, but actually everything should go fine. Well, it is now or never. Only this last customs was to withstand, then he would have made it after all these exertions. He drove into the Route de la Guerre. Shortly afterward, he saw a bridge, and the end of it there were placed the two customs. The French customs let him pass as expected without questions. Now, there he was driving and coming with every pedaling nearer to the reign of André Maillard. André Maillard was a customs officer by the book. At least, that is how he saw himself. He worshipped the French cuisine and was in favor of the private hunting. Hunting and eating were his passions. Together with his hunting dog, he went often chasing in the nearby French woods during his spare time. And was there something better in this world than a self-chased and cooked lapin à l'estragon rabbit on tarragon? Or even a canard à l'orange duck on orange? He could not understand these people who were doing constantly some diet. Absolutely no understanding he had for vegetarians. He saw it as a blasphemy. In any case, he saw it as an incredible taunt to the Almighty, living in a land where there were so many different culinary possibilities and then renounce voluntarily to meat. How could they? He had remained celibate. The irregular working hours did not get along with a marriage in his opinion. In reality, it was more likely his stubbornness that hindered him being married. And therefore it was not surprising that André Maillard loved his work as customs officer over everything, because he was also here in a way on the chase. On the manhunt, André Maillard stood upright beside his customs lodge. It was Sunday 4 p.m. He had started shortly before with his shift and felt well, as today he had time to do his work properly, unlike during the week when he had to let pass most of the border crossers because of the sheer mass of them that crossed the border daily. Therefore, the young man that was approaching him on his bike came just at the right moment. "Hello, mister. Do you have something to declare?" said he to Jonas in a friendly but determined tone. No, nothing. Can I see your passport, please?" "I am sorry, but it was stolen from me." "Stolen, so. Please get to the bike, mister." Jonas got off the bike and put it on the kickstand, while he noticed that the customs officer brought himself in a kind of ambush position. His fears had come true. He had met an extremely pedantic customs officer, which took his work absolutely serious. Did he smell a rat? The hiding place should be secure. If he wants, he can search me in the rucksack as much as he wants, thought Jonas. André Maillard was angry. "Do you know that it is forbidden to cross the border without a passport and that you have to report the lost immediately to the authorities? Give me your personal data." He took a block and a pencil to make notes. Jonas Bachmann, resident at the Cross Street 9 in Orden. Born in January 19th, 1975, answered Jonas laconic. "What is the name of your parents? And from your mother, I need the maiden name, please." "Frederick Bachmann and Angie Gerber." André Maillard wrote everything down, and then he said to Jonas, "Wait here a moment, I have to check your personal data." Then he went over to the nearby customs lodge where he had his PC and from where he could keep an eye on Jonas at any time. After 2 minutes, he came out of the lodge and said to Jonas, "Well, everything seems to be right. When did you lose your passport?" "Yesterday." "How did it happen?" insisted André Maillard. Jonas paused shortly, and then he answered, "I was in a roadhouse. I put it away in my rucksack only for a moment in front of the toilet door, because it was so narrow inside the toilet. When I came out, I noticed that my passport and May valuables were stolen." "And? Did you notify the police?" "I wanted to do it here in Switzerland." "You have to report it on the spot. Otherwise, the insurance will not indemnify you for the damage. Remember that. Now, show me the content of your rucksack." Jonas shuffled off his rucksack and handed it over to Maillard. He took it and asked Jonas to step back. Then he started to unpack it, and piece by piece he took the unwashed clothes of Jonas out of it and putted them on the asphalt. Then he palpated the rucksack, but he didn't find anything. However, André Maillard was not the guy who gave up easily. He putted the things back into the rucksack and said then to Jonas, "You are a strange guy. Please stand still with your back turned to me." Jonas turned around with a qualm, and then Maillard started to palpate him like a gangster. He started to fear that Maillard would also strip search him. Terrible the idea of having to let down his unwashed pants in front of him and to bend over so that he could light him between his cheeks. "Well, I should search you more thorough." Maillard paused a moment and gave it a reflected. "Well, let's leave it at that. What brings you here?" "You reside in Olton, which is about 250 kilometers away from here. I am on a bicycle tour. Andre Maillard looked examining at him and said with an unmistakable doubt in his voice, with such a bicycle. Such a bike is not adequate for a big tour. Show me the bicycle, please. Jonas got nervous and he hurried up to answer. Well, I only did a small tour of 30 kilometers. I came here by train and will also return by train from Geneva, while he still grasped the bicycle. Okay, but I still want to have a closer look at the bicycle, and with these words Maillard took it out of Jonas's hands and turned it at one push upside down. Let's have a closer look at the vehicle identification number. Where's the number? Here. Well, let's see. Suddenly Jonas grew stiff. He saw how the cocaine started to trickle off very subtle nearby the bicycle seat. Jonas got panicky. Did he see it? Oh my God, I have absolutely to do something against it. My God, what do I see here? Shouted Maillard suddenly. Jonas startled up. Well, it is over. I surrender. The game is over. My God, what a pitiful ending. Caught by a cheap wannabe sheriff. After all these exertions. After all I have come through. He had defied so many adversities, and now that. Fate, oh fate, I condemn you, you damn bitch. I condemn you. Why are you doing this to me? You are driving around without a bicycle vignette. This is a criminal act. Do you know what consequences that can have when the bicycle gets stolen? No insurance of the world will pay you a dime. And even worse is that if you damage somebody, you are liable by yourself. And by the way, is this your bicycle? Jonas needed some seconds to wake up of his paralysis. What? Is he nuts? He did not notice it. Half out of his senses he answered him. Yes. The bicycle vignette. I forgot to affix it. I am terribly sorry, sir. I am sorry. That's what they all say. Then he pulled out his writing pad and pencil and said, well, I will now write down the vehicle identification number and check if this bicycle was reported as stolen. Quick reacting, Jonas approached the bicycle and putted his feet at the spot where the cocaine had trickled down and formed already a small rise. Andre Maillard felt disturbed by that. What was this guy thinking by getting so close to him? Unfortunately, he did not yet hold something useful against him in his hands. He was convinced that this would change soon. Well, same game as before. Stay here at this spot, said he to Jonas while he went over to the customs lodge to his PC. Jonas grabbed the bike and turned it again back on his wheels, while at the same time he pulled back his feet so that the rise of cocaine on the asphalt got smudged. What are you doing there? Shouted Maillard, while his hand glided to his weapon. Are you trying to flee? Well, go on. He ardently hoped that Jonas would give it a try, so that he finally could pull out his weapon. I only wanted to put it up. Freeze and stay where you are, like I told you. Jonas nodded and was really alleviated to see that the cocaine had stopped to trickle out of the bicycle. In a few moments, Maillard would see on the screen what he was suspecting. Soon he would be allowed to pull out his weapon and arrest this vagabond, this bicycle thief, this thug, this scruffy scoundrel. But then the modern technique once again disappointed him bitterly. What a shame. What a shame that the hunch of a righteous officer nowadays was not sufficient enough to arrest such blackguards and throw them for a few days into jail in order to get them to reason. On the PC screen, he could read, vehicle number not registered. It was not possible to retrieve corresponding data. In Austria, still these days, a policeman has the right to estimate the speed of a drive-passing vehicle. If his estimate lies above the allowed maximum speed, he can issue a fine. Andre Maillard went with his inclined head over to Jonas and said then, hurry up to get out of my sight, otherwise I cannot guarantee, and while saying he clenched his fist. Jonas did like he said. He heaved his rucksack on his back, mounted on the bicycle and went up and away. After 20 kilometers, he had reached over the route de Cheney, directly into the heart of Geneva. Chapter 12, The Smart One Goes by Train. Hallelujah! He shouted, relieved to stand at the Place de Cornavin in front of the railway station in Geneva. He had made it. From here on it would be easy to get to Orden. He did not have any money on him, but he neither needed, as he had a very simple plan how he could get home. He looked for a direct train between Geneva and Orden, one without transit stops, and found one in form of a double-floored ICN train, which left Geneva at 2014 and arrived in Orden at 2219. He got on the train, left his bike in the indicated zone, and took a place nearby so that he could keep an eye on it. The journey would get tough, as he did not want to fall asleep and risk that somebody stole him the bike with his precious content. Especially for him it would be hard, as he liked to sleep during train journeys, particularly after all these adventures, efforts, and deprivations. Well, the train conductor, which came around after 30 minutes, contributed his part in him staying awake. Like expected, Jonas got into a ticket control, but the conductor did not have any other alternative than keeping him in the train until the next transit stop, which in that case was the place where Jonas wanted to go anyway. He also bore with calm the procedure of verification of his personal data by the railway police when they arrived at Orden, which was called by the train conductor as Jonas did not have any documents or money with him. The procedure seemed known to him. The police confirmed to the train conductor the personal data given by Jonas, and he received a fine for fare dodging. The following dismissal by the conductor was quite chilly. When Jonas rang the bell at his home and his mother opened the door, he was absolutely devitalized and happy to see her. Everything was said by saying, "I could not stand it any more over there." She took him into his arms and gave him a big hug, and after a tasty dinner with his parents, where he made up a lot of adventures and experiences, he sank totally exhausted into his bed. Chapter 13. Back to the roots. The next day, Jonas contacted, after an opulent Swiss breakfast with bread and jam, his middleman Speedy. "As you can see, I am back and I made it. Is our arrangement still valid?" He was bragging, but if Speedy would answer no, then he really would be stranded. "Of course, my dear." Furthermore, Speedy assured him, with coded words, that he had not been inactive during his journey. He had kept Mike by the line, so that they could now conclude the big deal. Jonas did not believe him a word, but it did not matter to him right now. "When can we come to a closing?" got Jonas to the heart of the discussion. "Well, if you are in such a hurry, I think we can get it clear in 2 days. I will contact our friend and give you then green light." Shortly after he had talked with Jonas, Speedy contacted Mike. The next day, Jonas bought a solvent to dissolve the superglue from the bicycle frame so that he could set free the valuable freight. Thereby, he also found out why the cocaine had trickled off. The plastic bags in which it was stored had gotten scraped. On D-Day, Jonas and Speedy met like always at their regular place in the pub to depart together from there to Mike's place. During the drive to Mike, which awaited them by 9 p.m. at his home, Speedy annoyed Jonas by giving him a lot of instructions and tips how he had to behave during the handover. Jonas got the feeling that it was rather his first time doing such a deal than Jonas's one. He did such an unreliable impression on him that it had almost a ridiculous effect, which was finally the reason why he did not get tainted by Speedy's conduct. Mike, aka Black Mamba, expected them at the top floor of the skyscraper, which was situated at the edge of the city. He had rented the both apartments at the top floor. One of them he used for himself, the other he used as indoor grass plantation, drying room included. With an air handling system, which he had built in before he started with his plantation, he transported the outgoing air after filtering directly outside up, so that nobody could smell the characteristic smell of grass as he was in the top floor. It worked pretty well, as nobody had noticed something during the past 2 years. It worked also well, because Mike was very discreet. Only he knew about the plantation. When they arrived to the top floor, a drop-dead redhead beauty opened the door, after Speedy had knocked a certain knocking code on the door. When Jonas entered Mike's apartment, he saw on the walls several large tapestries on which there were printed motifs of Bob Marley, Martin Luther King, the Black Panther's fist, kaleidoscopic patterns, and wild African animals. Behind Mike's back, there was a painting hanging with a black snake on a yellow background. The whole scenery made a pretty scurrile impression on Jonas. The many leather couches that were strung together filled up practically the whole living room space. On a wall, he saw flickering without tone an old movie from the 70s. The image came from a projector, which was assembled to the ceiling. Jonas assumed that he was screening Shaft, if he did not mistake. Mike was sitting there, inclined forward rolling a joint, while the clean-limbed redhead took place in a corner. She obviously was his girlfriend. While Mike welcomed them with a high Speedy, even if he did not raise the head, his girlfriend did not say a word. She only sat there and stared at them with the bite of her blue eyes. At the Mike's right side, he saw a glass cabinet. Mike had obviously exposed their pieces of his weapons collection. He was able to locate a butterfly knife, 2 small pistols, and even the specially sculptured combat knife from the motion picture Cobra, which had the form of a brass knuckle with spikes and a blade at one end. Speedy saluted him also with a "Hi, Mike," while he only threw a "hello" to his girlfriend, and then he slouched himself on a free space of the numerous leather couches. Jonas saluted both of them with a hello together, and did the same as Speedy. He was disappointed. The whole scenery seemed so dilettantish, so incongruously patched up. Not at all like he had expected it. Influenced by the world of the movies, Ha had expected a though guy where you have to be on fear for your life, and where each encounter is similar to a balancing act. Each false step can mean your death. This here simply wasn't so thrilling and exciting. Well, the reason partially lied in the fact that Mike wasn't a pure cocaine dealer. He mainly dealt with grass and sometimes with ecstasy pills or LSD. So, not a big fish, but also not so insignificant and pitiful like a drug dealer standing around the corner on the street. Speedy knew that, but he had bragged in front of Jonas with his contact to get him to make the deal with Mike. On the other hand, he had convinced Mike that Jonas's cocaine would give both the chance of a good bargain without the risk of transport and import. In any case, it was worth a try. Well then, let's see what the coca man has brought us, started Mike the conversation. His voice was deep, and with a little practice he could have acted as Barry White double. Speedy got excited and answered, "My friend Jonas here is a true adventurer. He traveled up to the Indians and brought us 3 beautiful kilograms of cocaine, didn't you, Jonas?" Jonas nodded consent and fished out a small transparent plastic bag out of his pocket. "Do you want to take a pull from it?" asked Mike him and handed him over the joint. Jonas took it, and he felt it like the ritual of the Indians when they smoked together the peace pipe. Smoking together a joint had the effect of connecting to others, and in this case it was also conductive to business. He handed over the cocaine bag to Mike, but to his surprise Mike reacted with a gesture that signalized him to handle the bag instead to his girlfriend. "She will make a test to check out the quality. Trust is fine, quality check is better." He. The redhead took the bag snippy out of his hand and went with it over to the next room. Her figure was fabulous. 1 minute passed. Jonas was just about to pull strong on the joint, when suddenly they heard a loud knocking on the front door and somebody shouted, "Here speaks the police. Open up the door immediately." "Dim it, this can't be true," shouted Jonas. Speedy on his part got scared and rigid eyes. Mike remained contained. He stood up and went agile like a tiger to the glass cabinet. He opened the lower drawers and got several bags with grass, hashish, ecstasy pills, and LSD out of it. Then he quick went over to the toilet and started to throw everything in. Meanwhile, the noise at the front door got increasingly louder. The 6-man strong police team, which was led by Roman Breschler, lost his patience. They picked the ram and started to provide themselves entry. With a big bang, the door gave away after a short while. The Special Forces unit entered the apartment and brought itself in formation. Then they shouted, "We are from the police. Nobody moves and put your hands over your head." The members of the Special Forces were equipped with helmets and bulletproof vests. They had their arms at gunpoint. 4 of them spread out. One came towards Jonas and the other towards Speedy. Another one had found Mike in the toilet and shouted at him, "Stop immediately and put your hands over your head." The 4th bounced into the room where Mike's girlfriend was huddling scared in a corner. Now it is like in the movies, thought Jonas. And what kind of mess did he get here? Now his journey was definitively over. They putted them all in and brought them to the elevator, while one special ops guy remained together with the on-scene commander in the apartment, and together they started to search it and securing evidences. Meanwhile, outside, they all squeezed themselves into the elevator apart from Jonas and his guard. There was no space left for them. "We take the stairs and meet us at the ground floor," said the policeman to his colleagues. "Come with me," said he and pulled heavy on Jonas's jacket. They went down 1 floor. The policeman continued to push Jonas forward. Somehow nobody had noticed that Jonas's hands were cuffed at his front. Jonas took profit from the situation. Suddenly he broke away from the grasp of the policeman and gave him a kick in his knee. The policeman was so surprised that he fell backwards and bumped his head. Jonas started to run, like if the devil himself was pursuing him. He rapidly descended 1 floor after the other. Meanwhile, he had reached the ground floor as he heard yelling from above, "Halt! Stop!" The colleagues at the ground floor already were loading the arrested criminals into a box wagon. They weren't able to hear the screaming of the injured policeman, but the screaming was heard by his colleagues and the officer in charge who had remained in the apartment. They both hurried up to help their colleague. When they reached him, they saw that he was injured and that he limped. Thereon they took up the chase of Jonas, while the injured one informed his colleagues on the road and the operations center by radio about the happenings. Meanwhile, Jonas had reached the basement. He hoped that he could leave the house by a subterranean garage or a backyard. Otherwise, he would be captured down here, like a mouse in a cage. Hectically, he tore at every door handlebar he passed by. Finally, one door opened. He hurried down the passage, then he took a stairway that led him down to the right. Then again, he opened a door and hurried further through a gangway. When he reached the end of it, he found himself in a subterranean garage. He hurried along many garage boxes, then right. At the end of it, there had to be a driveway to the road, but when he reached the driveway, he only saw a big garage door. Jonas' thoughts run wild. There has to be somewhere a switch to open the door. Maybe there is a contact at the floor or a switch at the wall. Nothing. Damn. There is a barely visible additional smaller door built into the big garage door. Excited, he pulled down the door handle and the door opened up. From outside, he couldn't have opened it, as there was only a fixed doorknob. He left the garage, while the policeman had meanwhile also reached the gangways to the subterranean garage. Two of the policemen went around the house, while Jonas ran up the driveway to the garage. When he arrived at the road, he ducked his head. No one was in sight. The driveway to the garage was situated in another street than the main entry to the building where Mike lived, as the huge subterranean garage was used by various circumjacent buildings. Jonas started again to run. The handcuffs were extremely obstructive and slowed him remarkably down, as he could not swing his arms, like usually when running. At the next corner he turned right, and then left, and as it was night and a living quarter, he did not encounter any people on the road, only an old man with his dog, which gazed at him a little disconcerted. Jonas reached a narrow bridge, which led over some railways. Below the bridge he saw a smaller house. He had an idea. If he could climb over the high iron barrier and then jump on the angled roof of the house and from there lay back down to the railways, he could probably escape from the police. He gave it a try. The iron barrier of the bridge was easy to climb. It was more difficult to hold the balance on it, in order to swing his second leg over the barrier to the other side. But also that he managed. Now he was holding himself with both hands on the upper range of the iron grid. He stemmed his feet against the bridge wall. Then he ejected himself and landed on the slanting roof. Holding here, the balance showed out to be more difficult than expected. Suddenly he struggled forwards, felt on his stomach and slid down the roof towards the roof gutter. When he arrived there, he barely managed to hold onto the gutter. Because of the drive, he went head over heels and dashed with his back against the wall, while he still held onto the twisted gutter. The pain quickly got so strong that he let go the gutter and fell down 5 meters to the railways. He had underestimated the altitude and felt unprepared to the ground. The pain in his legs got insupportable and then he went senseless. After 20 minutes, the police rescued him out of his misery. They also had met the old man and he had indicated them in which direction Jonas had fled. Chapter 14. This is the end, my only friend. This is the end, beautiful friend. This is the end, my only friend. The end of our elaborate plans. The end of everything that stands. The end. Jim Morrison. When Jonas came to conscience, one day had passed. He was alone in a patient's room. As he started to the right towards the room door, he saw through the alabaster glass a bleary figure stand in front of the door. Suddenly the door opened and a doctor in a white coat entered the room. Mr. Bachman. My name is Joseph Wrangler. I am the ward physician and my duty is to pay you a daily visit and get an image of your state, said he in a cold, factual tone. Jonas remained silent. You are here at the infirmary of a prison. Last night you were in surgery at the cantonal hospital because of various complicated femur fractures. The right socket of the femur got so much damage by the fall that there will remain with high probability a limb disability. Jonas gulped. The doctor's tactless express statement caught him absolutely unprepared. I now leave you now alone with your assigned counsel, and with these words he left the room and handed over the door handle to the assigned counsel. A tall, lean man with a lanky, much too big suit and a briefcase and glasses entered the room. Albert Trader is my name. Greetings, Mr. Bachman. That is your name, isn't it? Said he unsecure and handed him his hand. Well, that started good. This guy even didn't know his name. Nevertheless, Jonas handed him his hand. I am here to help you within my possibilities. Where are my parents? Intercepted Jonas him impatiently. Oh, I am sorry, but your parents don't wish at the moment any contact to you. Especially your father was not very turned on by your activities after yesterday's house search and that what they found in your parents' house. That is why he was not prepared to take over the cost for your juridical defense. That is why I am here to stand you by. Well, that was now his actual situation. In the hour of his greatest need, even his parents left him alone. In that very moment, he realized that everything he had done was wrong, but he could not understand that they gave up on him. It hurt him a lot, Therefore, he only listened with one ear to the further explanations of his assigned counsel, which continued to say, "For the present you are being accused of possession of ca 3 kilograms cocaine. The investigation is still going on. Until now there are no police records in your past, which speaks for you. But how did it come that far? You have a bachelor and they're with good chances in life. Somehow your criminal act does not fit to the circumstances in the milieu you live within. The best would be that we start from the beginning so that I can understand the whole thing better and build up my defense strategy accordingly." Jonas hesitated a moment, then he answered, "Look, I am aware that I have done a huge mistake, but right now I do not want to talk with you. I am terribly sorry. I appreciate your efforts, but Well, Mr. Bachman, you do not have to talk to me, but with the police you will have to. Good luck." His tone of voice had changed drastically because he was upset. After he left the room, Jonas had peace for about 10 minutes, then the door opened again and Police Inspector Lushner entered the room. Police Commissioner Lushner was 45 years old and worked since 20 years for the DEA. He had absolved a professional carrier by the book and was the officer in charge for the Operation Snakebite, which objective it was to put a stop to the activities of an international operating ring of Nigerian drug dealers. On his investigations, Michael Kaufman, alias Mike, also got into his view. The reason was his girlfriend Cornelia Meyer, which worked as a drug courier for the gang and also provided drugs for Mike. So Mike was rather a marginal figure in the whole operation, but this didn't change the fact that also Jonas was on his list of accused criminals. Commissioner Lushner started with the questioning of Jonas. He would later explain to him what circumstances led to his arrest, but right now his questions had priority. "What is your relationship to Michael Kaufman, alias Mike?" "Well, I only know him since yesterday. Previously, I only heard of him. Speedy introduced me to him." "You mean Uwe Oppmann, alias Speedy?" Unexpectedly, Jonas realized how less he knew about Speedy. He even didn't know his real name. He answered, Yes, exactly. Where did you get the 3 kilograms cocaine, which we found in your apartment?" "I brought it here from Colombia with me," answered he, surprisingly open. Lushner was surprised by his answer and said, "You have to explain me that more precisely." And Jonas started to tell him about his odyssey, although he left out some occurrences, of which he thought that the commissioner wouldn't believe him or that they would put him even in a worse light. After he had ended telling his story, Commissioner Lushner said to him, "These are very aggravating criminal acts that you committed, Mr. Bachman." "Why, Mr. Bachman? I can't understand it. You come from a good parental home, and looking at the whole picture you do not fit into all this. Well, I can't understand it." Jonas recognized that the main reason for his deeds was very simple, simply to enrich himself. He also recognized that such a motive was not very favorable for the determination of a prison sentence, therefore he felt ashamed and answered, "Well, I do not know what got into me." Jonas was not able to give satisfactory answers to the following questions that Lushner asked him. He certainly showed remorse, what was important to the commissioner, but his motive was at the same time very banal and profit-seeking, what did not put him into the best light. Lushner was not able to estimate the penalty Jonas would get, but he recognized that he could not contribute something useful regarding the investigations against the Nigerian gang, simply because he didn't know anything about them. He left him after an intensive 2-hour interrogation and booked the whole happening under a collateral success. By the way, he had got 3 kilograms of cocaine out of traffic and had arrested a wannabe dealer. Back in the room remained a confused Jonas, which was discouraged about him. Christian Ferbassin was now completely certain. He had checked for the second time the sample with the chromatograph to exclude all doubts. The result was both times the same. The sample contained 76% of ephedrine, 14% of caffeine, and only 10% of cocaine. Ephedrine was known for his pushing and euphoric effects. In those aspects, it was equal to amphetamine. Even if its original purpose was the medication of asthma, it was often misused as stimulant. Why the sales without prescription had been stopped by the authorities years ago. With a high sense of duty, he wrote down his conclusion in a forensic report to Commissioner Lushner. He was curious to find out how the commissioner would interpret his results and what that would mean for the further fate of the accused. In any case, the results of his analysis had to lead to the conclusions that the buyer was a victim of a swindler or that the accused himself tried to sell the analyzed substance merchandise as cocaine. When Commissioner Lushner read by the evening the report of Christian Ferbassin, he had, unlike him, only one conclusion, namely that Jonas had been a victim of a fraud. What implied that it had to be true. when Jonas had assured him that it was the first time he had done something like that. That again meant that he would surely get a less penalty. Lushner informed the state attorney Mrs. Doctorlick. Jur. Brigitta Torpovsky, a rightful, slightly pedantic old maid, which only weakness seemed to be that she occasionally misplaced her glasses. As he couldn't reach her by phone, he wrote her a mail with the intention to make Jonas's life a little bit easier, as he had been very cooperative, despite of his crime. Well, the fate wanted it, that Mrs. Tropovsky had misplaced once again her glasses, so that she was not able to read the mail of Commissioner Lushner until the next day. After reading it, she informed the assigned counsel of Jonas, in order that he could inform Jonas about the new findings. The diminution of his penalty and the relaxation of his arrest regulations would be notable considering the new circumstances. Mr. Stalin, the manager of the prison, sent out a guard, after he had been informed by Jonas's assigned counsel, to the sick bay to bring him the good news. When the guard opened the door to the patient's room and entered it, a bad smell of vomit was laying in the air. The guard was bothered about that Jonas did not wake up even if he had saluted him loud and clear. That is why he gripped his arm and shook him, but even that didn't help, and he got nervous. When he couldn't feel any pulse at Jonas's carotid artery, he gained certitude about Jonas's death. The called ward physician, Dr. Ringler, also only could determine Jonas's death. His forensic analysis of the cause of death resulted in the discovery that Jonas suffered hereditary from a light metabolism disorder of the liver. Jonas had deceased because of a self-administered overdose of paracetamol. Paracetamol is itself a harmless painkiller, but unfortunately it is possible to reach with 12 pills containing each 1 gram a deadly overdose. In particular, if you got already a damaged liver. Death occurs within 12 to 24 hours after administration of the medicinal drug. Commissioner Lushner spared Jonas's parents the unpleasant details of his death and even let open if it was a self-inflicted death or a tragic mistake of him, as the circumstances also left open an interpretation of the happening in that direction. Chapter 15. Epilog. In fact, Jonas had committed unknowingly suicide. He had taken out of desperation at once the whole drugs that had been given to him to alleviate the strong emotional strain that had overcome him. After his interlocution with Commissioner Lushner, he had thought about his deeds, and he had come to the conclusion that his actual position, the imminent imprisonment, and the future physical handicap were the result of his mislead plan for the future and his inappropriate expectations of life. In the roulette of life, he had put his future at risk, deliberately at risk, and had lost it almost all. His actions were motivated by wrong demands. The stations and encounters during his journey had ripened in him the insight realization that other people had much worse chances in life and lived in much worse circumstances, and still they did not take the path he had chosen. The path of selling cocaine to enrich him, a path that included, even required the suffering of others. The unfathomable powers of fate had watched over the fortunes of Jonas, and they finally had succeeded to put him in his plan to downfall, although he had escaped them again and again during his odyssey. It was the punishment for the damage in other people's future caused by his actions that he had accepted deliberately, to deal with other people's future. The end.